Hi again, guys, nerds of the world. Thank you so much for joining again another Friday. This is the last Friday of this season. And
For joining again another
Friday. This is the last I had again, like in the first episode, but this is a good sign. I'm still need training. So thank you so much again. Like, I'm gonna continue. Thank you very much for joining every Friday, for interacting with us, for enjoying, and I really hope you guys can do that also, because the next guest is really cool, really nice guy. I really like him personally and professionally, admire a lot, and I just hope you can interact with us, like have all your questions that you want to ask him about his life, his career, all the doubts you have, and feel inspired. That's the whole point when I'm doing this. So I'm just gonna stop talking and introduce our next guest, which is Evan Sirchuk, also known as Cheaper Switch. And here it is. Hello, welcome, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation to be part of this. I cannot hear you, I guess.
Shasha, gotta hit the unmic, unmute. We both need training. Yeah, so hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm happy to nerd out, and this is a really cool program, and yeah, let's talk nerd. Let's do it. It's Friday. How about that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, dude, like, thank you very much. Actually, we have been talking a lot lately since we met at NAM.
Yeah.
And there are many things, like, for example, like that we were just talking now and about our past, that I would also like to share with others, which they're very interested. People that I guess we all share the same passion for music, food, games, like, nerd stuff. So I'm gonna start asking you the first question, which is something very common the very common question I ask everybody. Where are you from, and where did you grow up?
Sure. Yeah, so it's one and the same for me. I live in El Cerrito, California, so that's it's part of the San Francisco Bay Area. So, like, this is going to be, let's see if this looks right. Okay, so if this is the San Francisco Bay, kind of, like San Francisco's like down here, and Marin is up here, and like Oakland's right here, and El Cerrito's like right here on the bay, and then it's all connected by this thing called the BART train. So we're kind of like, you would maybe call us like a suburb of Berkeley, kind of.
Okay.
So yeah, it's all like it's all like one kind of contiguous, like, city suburban landscape. Yeah, so El Cerrito, small town, has 2 train stations for no reason, and yeah, born and raised. You don't have to be from somewhere like famous to get into audio. Like, I don't know. If you zoom out Google Maps to its normal distance, the name of our city doesn't even show up. So
okay,
we're part of an exclusive club of cities you've never heard of, but that's okay.
Well, you're making it famous now, so
yes,
you're a very good representative of your town now.
Yeah, you're welcome to come. Just don't raise rents, please.
But that's really cool that actually you mentioned that you don't have to be part of, like, growing a super huge city to, like, to achieve your dreams or to just follow them. At the end, you will find the way. It doesn't matter. Not have to be New York or, like Barcelona or Berlin. Everybody has his own path, and at the end, we all then end up, if we work really hard, in my opinion, I think we all end up where we want to be.
Yeah, I think proximity, like, is important. I think the trick is you just have to, like, I mean, for me, I kind of lucked out because I'm so close to San Francisco. So, and there's a long history of electronic music stuff in like UC Berkeley, and between Berkeley and then Oakland has like a big underground scene for shows, and San Francisco is the hub of a lot of tech stuff. So I don't want to discount proximity. I think it is important, but if you do live in somewhere where it's like people haven't necessarily heard of, I think it's definitely possible to find whatever events are in your area and like go to them. Like networking is the number one most important thing. Just make yourself like around. And like nowadays, like synthesizer stuff and modular stuff has become like so like ubiquitous that it is very possible to find like groups in your area. Like if you're curious about like synth stuff in your area and like, oh, there's no synth stuff in my area, check out, maybe we can put this in the description later, but I was part of this thing called the the Synth Society Summit, who was put on by Trovarsi, who was like your guest in the first episode. And we did this like group call with like synth societies like all across the United States. And like, there's like, I think it's like the Midwest Synth Society or something like that. There's like a whole bunch of synthesizer groups that you can like go to like all over like the Midwest and Texas and Louisiana. And so like, it's possible to find people who are interested in your hobby. Plus you have the internet. So everybody's local. So, but I think also like going to big shows is like going to like trade shows and going to big like conventions and stuff for me has been like super, super important. Mm-hmm. So like even like small ones, like the music, well, it's not small, but the music tech at SF was one that was really important for my career, like meeting the right people there. Mm-hmm. But like, I guess I'm rambling, but I'm saying that you can be from a small town and find, a way to network and find people locally and find like big events that you can go to and just shake hands and get to know people. And it's very possible. There's so many different weird niche jobs in audio that, you may even like not know exactly what you're going to do when you go into an event. Like I didn't know necessarily that I was going to be doing like the combination of like videography and sound design stuff when I went to like NAMM for the first time. I was just there to help a booth, and I knew kind of what I had done before, and then I just talked to different manufacturers and kind of just felt out what they needed and then tried to fit that with like my skill set. And then I just kind of fell into doing what I am doing now. So anyway, yeah.
No, but that's really interesting though. Like, it's really cool because many people like ask, many people ask, and actually many people has that doubt in their minds, like, how can I from here where I am, this small town, make it to work in audio, work in the synth industry, or make it like into music business, for example? It's so impossible. I'm actually not, like I don't live in super big city. And I had that question too. Like I didn't grow up in a big city. And as you say, even like I can tell you that where I grew up, there is no synth industry. Like there is no one that I know that ever have been interested in the synthesizer but me.
Yeah.
So at some point, I did have any other, like it was a city nearby that was like an hour ago driving. And then you can find, I could find, like events and people interested on the same interests I had. So it is a very important question. And that's one of the kind of like the reasons why I started doing that. Like many people has the same question, how can I make it to meet people and be part of this community? And at the end, it all ends up in human interaction. Like going to these events and making your best to. Nowadays also we have social media like Instagram and many other ways of groups, and on Facebook, for example, that we can actually interact with other people, and at some point, like gather together in some small events or community around our city, or even invest a little bit of going to Super Bowl, for example. That is so like we all meet at Super Bowl here in Europe, and I guess in NAM is the same. Like everyone at once a year they invest their money of going there and meet people who share the same passion. So I think that's really important to be talked, I guess. And yeah, no, not dishing like small towns or or anything. No, that's not the point. But we all come from different backgrounds and from different places around the world, and I think it is important to get to know how we all made it to work in this industry. So yeah, that's really cool though. Like it's really nice. Have you ever thought of like moving out there or going somewhere else, or just
I mean, the thing is, like, California is really, really expensive right now. And I have a living situation that is, not like a screaming deal, but is a pretty good deal for me. And I have a decent amount of space for like all my studio equipment and stuff. So like for me, it's like, and I live about 45 minutes to 50 minutes away from
San Francisco?
Well, San Francisco, yeah, depending on traffic. I mean, now it's like 35 minutes because there's no traffic. But yeah, so I mean, I've worked in San Francisco on and off, and normal commute is about an hour and a half. So one way. So, the commute is real, when you start realizing, oh man, like I lose 3 hours a day being on a train. As much as I am a 11-year-old kid and love trains, that's a lot of time to be, eating. So I definitely, I've thought about it, but honestly, it's just so out of my price range that I'm just like, I'm going to focus on other things and try. I mean, now that everyone's suddenly okay with working from home, I think a lot of that is going to change. And we'll see how that affects like our society and our working culture long term. Yeah, I see myself staying in El Cerrito for a really long time. So I don't see myself moving necessarily. But like I said, like, and as you were mentioning, like trade shows and conventions are really, really important.
Yes.
Because everybody can contact some manufacturer, and pitch them and be like, hey, I do this, and look at my website and blah, blah, blah. Right. And like, I'm one of the people who monitors like the Sonicware, Inc. Facebook page, like company page. Like we get messages from people who are like saying, oh, I do content, blah, blah, blah. You should send me some gear and I'll do a video. And like, I mean, if somebody's content is good enough and they have a lot of videos and a decent following, we're not necessarily against, working with somebody. But at the same time, you also have to, we're also pretty small and pretty like open to that kind of thing. Like we're really about like user content and like highlighting people in our community. But, most companies, man, that's just like, they get so many of those and they just don't even want to deal with it. You know what I mean? Like they have like, somebody like Korg or Yamaha, like they have a whole video production studio and that's what they do. And they have, official signed artists and they do demos and, they don't need Joe Schmo YouTube, necessarily, highlighting, being like, doing a tutorial video. So, but that's the thing though, is that's why conventions are so important, is because you can meet people, especially who are on the press side of companies, who like, because you've already met them in person and you've given them your business card, which you should have some business cards. I'll go on a rant about that later. But you've had that personal connection with them, right? Like they've talked to you, they can tell, your synths, or whatever the brand's product is, and you can show that, you're knowledgeable on it, and that, oh, here's what I can do, and I'd really like to work with you, and, this is this XYZ synth I've worked with forever, and I really like it, and feel like it's underrated or something like that. And then, give them your card, and then you follow up. Like, they're not going to email you. They got a million cards. Yep. You have to follow up. You have to get their card and be like, hey, it was nice meeting you at this event, blah, blah, blah. Like, I really excited about, this new product that's coming up, and, and have it be genuine. Don't be hyped about some product that you don't really like. I've done that before, and it does not end well.
It doesn't end up well, yeah.
Because then you're like, oh, I have to make sounds on something that I really am not, that just doesn't gel with me, or has some workflow that really doesn't work. And then eventually either you're going to come up with something that's not very inspired from a sound design perspective, or you're just not going to be able to fulfill what you said you do. And that feels so bad. Like having to come back to a company and be like, I can't wrap my head around this product, like blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry. Like I've had to do that. It's felt so bad. But that was a good lesson for me to learn. It's like, as much as you might want to just bite at every opportunity and be like, oh, this is opportunity. Like this is a company.
Yep.
Yeah, I should just do it. Like I can just I can just white knuckle my way through it. Like, don't. Like try and pick really try and pick a company that, their logic works for you, whether that's, you really like analog synths and you really like being able to touch buttons, or, maybe you're super talented and you like menu diving and you like these old obscure digital synths, like whatever it is, and the thing is, we live in such a cool time for synths because there's so much revival stuff. Like I swear to God, you can get a brand new version, not version, but a remix of any classic synthesizer, damn near. You can get, if you like the Yamaha the Casio CZ series, you can find some obscure module that does phase distortion synthesis, or you can find some plugin. There is a Casio. This is I felt like when I saw this plugin, I was like, wow, we've reached peak plugin was when the Casio's, I think it's called Virtual CZ, came out. I found that, and it's such an accurate emulation of a Casio synth. Let me repeat that: a Casio synth.
I didn't know
that you can load in the original presets into the plugin, the original SysX, and it will read it. It's nutty. And not only that, right? There's a bunch of different units from the Casio CZ line, 5,000 through the prosumer 100 or whatever, really low. You can change the engine so that it sounds like whatever specific model.
Yes.
So whatever synthesis you like, whatever's your thing, there's probably some company out there who's making a reboot of it, or has a similar interface, or so find a company that you're really passionate about, or find a few, because the one you really like might not work out for whatever reason, but just pick some different companies and try and see, what trade shows are they going to be at, how can I get really, really good with this product, how can I make myself useful for whatever company. What does that look like they need? I see somebody in the comments. CZ is amazing. Yes, it is. Casio is great. I wish they would actually make a synthesizer again. I'm just heartbroken because my and this was one of your questions that you sent me beforehand, what my first synthesizer was. My first synthesizer was a Kawai K4R. So it's a weird one. Yeah, I can actually, let me see. I came prepared. Check this out. Hopefully this will work. Switch to, what? Is it working? Aha! Oh, there's my breakfast bowl, but I got my webcam, my 720p webcam from like the 2000s.
Such a
Oh
boss.
baby. There we go.
Wow.
There she blows. The Kawai K4R rack mount, as all things should be. The 90s version of modular. Let's see if I can turn it on. Yep, there we go. Yeah, this is it, baby. It's like it's a 4 oscillator, like polyphonic synth. It's so great. It sounds like, I don't know. It sounds very digital, but in a fuzzy, awesome type of way. Hey, it's 16-bit, baby. 16-bit. So anyway, we can get back more. I can show you the rack more later. But that was my first synthesizer, and I bring that up because I'm totally heartbroken because Casio, who was like, I always had Casio like consumer gear, like I think my first like keyboard was like the Casio PT50, I think, which was one of those Casios like that's like about this big. It has a bunch of memories in it. They all kind of have the same sounds in them, but they're a bunch of different colors, and it had like a little cartridge that you could put into it that had like, a song memory before it was like MIDI. It was like a little weird cartridge. And so both the companies that are like my origin companies that I'm like, oh, I love, are like, don't make synthesizers anymore. like Casio. I mean, Casio makes keyboards with preset sounds, but they haven't made like
their own
synthesizers since like what do they call it? I think it's like the PX series or something like that. And it just to me it doesn't sound super great. I like the concept of it. I really like the interface. It's got like tons of sliders and stuff, and like it's really cool. And I always like want to hype myself up on it. I'm like, oh, I should get one of those, especially now because they're getting probably towards the end of their production run on it. And I'm like, I should get one. But then every time I see a demo, it's like all organ sounds, and I'm like, I just can't convince myself to buy one. But maybe in the future I'll get Casio's last real synthesizer. But I don't know. The last thing I need is more gear right now. But so anyway, that's why I'm like so heartbroken. Is because it's Casio. And then I was in Japan in last October, and I went to the Kawai showroom because I was hoping that they would have some like Kawai synth like old merch or something. Like I was just trying to scope it out because like me and my brother, like we made the ROM chips for like the Kawai K4R. Like there was a firmware update for it that like kind of fixes the filter a little bit. And so I was talking to them about that. Like I went to the showroom and they were like super surprised that they were like, oh, somebody came here to talk to us about our synthesizer. And what's funny is they gave me a ton of marketing materials. Like they were like, hold on. They were super, super nice. And they were like, I was like, oh, do you have any like t-shirts or like, cause I wanted to rep Kawai, and I was like, oh, do you have any shirts or do you have any like old like synth stuff? And like, and I was with somebody who could like kind of translate for me, but like not super well. And they're like, oh, we're sorry. Like we discontinued like the K line, which I know they discontinued that. And like after the K5000, they were like, yeah, we got to actually make money on these, which is too bad because the K5000 is nuts. It's like the magnum opus of like 90s additive synthesis. Like there is no other major additive synthesis like keyboard like at all. So and they just took a huge gamble on that, I think, and then it just didn't super pan out for them. They still make amazing keyboards. They make like amazing pianos.
Yes.
So I love Kauai, but they were very sweet to me. They were like, sorry, they gave me like a whole little bag. I have a Kauai little like reusable plastic bag and like a bunch of different material. And they gave me like a CD, and it was great. They gave me their little thing that was like their whole timeline from Shigeru Kauai, who was actually a student of Mr. Yamaha, the original Mr. Yamaha. So Yamaha and Kauai are actually like have a connection history wise. He was like a student of Yamaha, and then this is a very Japanese thing to do, which is to work for a company and then you ask your boss for permission to like split off and make your own company. Like it's that much of like a respect based thing. Like you go like, hey, can I do this? Like, thank you for all your teaching, blah, blah, blah. Can I have my own, can I go start my own company? And yeah, it's like Mr. Yamaha was like, yeah, go do your thing,
But
and so that's like why Kauai started. Yeah.
I didn't know about it, man. That's so cool. And I find that very respectful and nice when you got all the information and inspiration and all the knowledge from someone and you just want to do your thing and just say like, thank you very much because, like you were my sensei, but now I want to do my own thing. Like,
yeah.
A lot of respect. So I find that very nice of them. I didn't know that Kauai was, like a student of Yamaha.
Yeah. Yeah.
One question here from Mike Moreno who said, have you heard or used a Yamaha VL1?
So yes, kind of. So there's a city in Japan called Hamamatsu, which is known for a couple of things. The biggest thing is they're like musical instrument manufacturing, and also pot stickers, which are like Japanese dumplings. That's another story. But so they are known for like instrument manufacturers. So if you go to Hamamatsu, it's possible you have to schedule it beforehand. But you can go on a Yamaha like showroom tour because they have their factories and like R&D out there. So you can go to this awesome showroom and it's got like a whole bunch of like classic like Yamaha synths. Like you can play like a CS80. You can like use like the VL1, like as he was mentioning, like the really famous like physical modeling, like virtual physical modeling keyboard. They have like the cool thing is like the whole museum is kind of like laid out in a timeline, so you can like go from like their very first products and like their giant like throne keyboard stations, first big huge polyphonic keyboards for like Stevie Wonder and stuff, and like all the way through like to their modern day stuff. And it's like a big timeline, and they show like this big tree, and it like goes from, well, I guess for viewers it's going like this, and it splits out, from their first. So Yamaha's first product was a foot-powered organ, which was about they have it, which is crazy. They have the original thing that. So I'm going to butcher this history because I only read it once, but essentially, Mr. Yamaha was like, I think he was kind of like an organ repair guy.
All right.
And he wanted to make his own musical instrument, but he didn't really have like formal musical training. Like he wasn't back then. If you wanted to be a musician, like you went to a music school.
Yes.
Like that was the only way that you would learn like musical stuff. And so he was like more on the technical side, being like a repairman. And so he'd go to these different, churches and stuff like that. And they would have like a pedal organ, essentially. And you'd sit there and you'd pedal it with your feet to like run the bellows. And then the air would go over the reeds. And then your hands like would touch the keys. And then that would play the organ. So he started getting really interested in wanting to make his own. So he paid, well, he was like supposed to repair this one for a church. And what he was doing was he was drawing pictures of the whole thing while he was supposed to be repairing it. And so the repair just kept taking longer and longer and longer. And the guy was like, "Are you going to repair this or what?" You know? And he was like, "Oh, like I'll pay you, like I'll do the repair for free. Just let me like have more time to draw out, you know, all the parts." And that's what he was doing. I mean, that was how you gained knowledge back then. You know, there wasn't some YouTube explainer video that was like how organs are made. You know, like that was like, you know, serious knowledge. So anyway, he built this organ, and I forget exactly where this was, but you know, it was a hand organ. So it's, I mean, a foot powered organs. These things are small. Plus, this is like Japan, and it's like post-war, so Japanese people are very small at this point. And so I'd say it's about 2 feet by 3 feet, maybe.
What?
It's small. Like, it's very small. Like, this little small organ. And this dude carried it on his back to, like, a music manufacturer to be like, "Here's what I made. Like, I'm worthy. You know, I know how to make these instruments. You know, give me funding. Like, I want to, you know, start making these on my own." He carried it, right, for like a couple days, I think, like on his back, on foot.
One thing I think I found on the website, because I'm checking at the same time, and I'm gonna share the screen.
Yeah.
Let me see if this is what we're talking about.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, he built it. Yeah. Yeah, in 1887. Yeah, so this was actually, so if this was 1887, I think this was still pre-war.
Yeah.
This was like before World War II. So yeah, he built this before the 1900s. Like, this is really early stuff. Yeah, and he carried this. It doesn't say it, but he carried it. And not only did he carry it, they didn't like it. So he carried it the whole freaking way, basically, for them to be like, "Yeah, it's, you know, it's neat." Basically what they said is like, "It's neat that you figured out how to do this."
Oh,
but
so impolite.
That was basically what they said. And they were like, "It's cool from a technical perspective, but like, it's not in tune to the extent that we needed to be in tune," right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of makes sense, because he wasn't like musically trained at all. You know, he was just kind of winging it. I mean, in some sense, he kind of knew how the mechanism worked, and, you know, maybe he had some reference for pitch, and he was, you know, trying to put it all in tune, but it essentially wasn't in tune enough.
From the engineering point of view, I guess he made it.
Yeah. So from there, he kind of refined it and kind of figured out. I think he ended up going to a music school for a while, and just like getting enough musical background to kind of build out, you know, a more to understand the musical concepts enough that he could build a keyboard that would be in tune and would be up to the standards that he needed. But yeah, and then after that, like once they got going, they kind of had a niche industry for making these keyboards and making these little pedal organs. And Mr. Yamaha had a really good sense of kind of the small touches that make an instrument, like, make it stand out. Like, he wasn't the only person making these, but like, here's an example, right? So a lot of times you have like women who are using keyboards and stuff. And back then it was a really big deal not to show your legs. So he made one of these organs, reed organ instruments, that had like a little skirt on it, sort of, so that a woman could like sit, you know, like on the floor and use it and be comfortable, and like maybe be cross-legged, but there was like a little kind of skirt on the like wooden kind of slats on it so that she wouldn't have to like, you know, show her legs. Like stuff like that. You know, he thought about the end user and kind of what their
That's very detailed.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, hey, guess what,
Are we
everybody?
getting that moment?
I have 10 boxes of ELZ1 synthesizers
Okay.
at my door. So, give me 1 second. Yeah.
Don't worry.
I just need to check on it. I will be back in 1 second. We just got our shipment in. So, 1 second.
Well, guys, actually, we talked about this before. Like, he was expecting some delivery. So I'm sorry for that. It's going to be just a few seconds. And, you know, when UPS knocks your door, you have to go and open, and otherwise you're not going to get your delivery. But this is actually very interesting. I didn't know all this stuff about Mr. Yamaha. Mostly like these little details, which are very interesting. And as you guys can see, like Evan he's like a book of history. He knows a lot of stuff that I didn't even know. But this is good, like, because we all together, like, getting to know him a bit better. Just to comment here, maybe some of you guys know him or don't know him, but I'm just gonna explain a little bit. He studied art, and I'm gonna ask him about that. If you guys have any question, you can also, you feel free to ask. And he has worked a lot to get where he is right now. He also worked for Impress Effects on the Zoya, making the sound design. Actually, he also was the first one on releasing a video tutorial about it, and it's very, very cool. It explains the product very, very well. So I'm gonna get the link very soon. I'm gonna add it here, so if you guys are interested, it's very cool to get to know it's very well explained and very well detailed. As you guys can see, he is very very detailed on everything. And then he went to work for Endo at Sonicware, and since then I think he's been working for a few years now. I'm just gonna ask him for how long he's been working with him. And he does all of the videos that you can find of the Liven and the LZX. And he also does the sound design. So most of the stuff that you see about the machine actually are made by him. And is very helpful also when it comes to getting to know a little bit into like the synth market and how can apply that knowledge to the end user and to make it more simple. So if I'm correct, he's back very soon. So yeah, that's it. I can only say that, guys, this is the last episode of again this season, and yeah, thank you so much for joining. We're gonna stay here for about an hour more. Then I am going to play tonight, so just gonna drop it there. And I'm actually going to show you guys his website if any of you is interested in what he's doing. It's on superswitch.com. Just a second, I'm gonna share the screen. Here it is. So something that is actually really cool that you can see is that he has a lot of different effects that he has designed on Ableton, and they're all for free. So you guys can see. Hello again.
Hello, I'm back. Hands washed. Back in action. So you're checking out my website, huh?
Yes,
I see you covering for me. Thank you.
I'm a pro, man.
Yes. I don't need any more training. I'm done. I'm a master of the interview. That's Flavia's byline. I'm young master now, no longer young Padawan.
I will become a young master when I start introducing a video and there is no YouTube sound in the background. That's not today.
And you'll think you're master, and then you'll be like 65, and you'll do that again, and you'll be like, and I'm done. I'm done.
It was meant to be. I started like that in the first episode, and I'm gonna end up like this in the last one. So I'm actually showing them your website, telling them that there is a lot of effects here that you can actually download.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually can download and use them. There is like Creative Commons license here, and there is a lot of them. So guys, you can, this Commodore Crunch, it's really cool. I heard that it's really, really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, no, they're yeah. So this is a good example of like how you can build your like resume, sort of. Yeah. So I made this site, for exactly that reason. I was like, okay, I need to like show some of my work. You know, if I'm going to do networking, I need somewhere I can send people. Plus, at the same time, I'm also kind of a nerd for like the really early internet, so like Web 1.0 websites and like HTML and stuff like that. So I started using this platform called NeoCities. And it's sort of like a reboot of the GeoCities model where you can just like sign up and you get some hosting and you get a URL and you just dump your HTML on it. Except it's even a little better because you can edit your HTML like in the site, like in browser. So you can like basically build your own website like for free on this on the NeoCities platform. So anyway, I got into that because of the nostalgia, but it turns out to be a really awesome platform for building like portfolio sites and stuff like this. And it's not like Squarespace or Wix or whatever that costs you like a certain amount a month. Like this website is tiny. It's all just coded in HTML. You can even, if you want, you can right click the site and view source and view all my HTML code. And it's got comments sort of in it. Like you could even just rip off my site. Like if you wanted to put your own content in it, feel free. Like I'm not tripping. Like it's just HTML and CSS code and like some images and some GIFs and some audio files. Like it's really not a complicated website. But having a site that you can point people to and be like, I made something and you can download it and it's real and I have sound clips. Sound clips are very important. Like
shall we listen to one of them maybe?
Sure. Sure.
Cool. This is really cool.
Oh, thanks.
I do like the sound of the snare. It's really cool.
Oh, thanks.
Let's see this one. Yeah. It kind of sounds like an electric though. It's really cool.
Yeah. That's I'm like reading my old description, trying to remember exactly how that thing works. Okay. Yeah, so essentially that thing works by like, so Ableton has like a redux effect that like lowers the sample rate and the bit depth. So what that's doing, I think, is it's like listening to the transients of the drums, and there's like an envelope generator that's connected to the sample rate, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time like a drum hits, it's gonna like kind of like a compressor, it like turns up the sample rate reduction. And then you can kind of like, there's like a gate in it that keeps it from getting too nasty and stuff like that. So yeah, check out my effects. They're free. You just need like Ableton for it. You don't need to buy any additional effects. I mean, any additional plugins to use it. It's not like Contact Patch or anything like that. Some of them are compatible with 9. It just kind of depends. Somebody asked about the service for web hosting. It's called NeoCities, like plural. I think it's neocities.org. Yeah. The guy who makes it, his name's Kyle Drake. He's super freaking cool. He lives in Portland. I've never met him, but he seems like a cool guy. And yeah, check it out. There's a bunch of like weird retro websites on there. It's it's pretty cool. But yeah, so like my site is chipperswitch.com. So you can actually, if you own a domain, like you've bought it through like Namecheap or Google Domains or whatever, you can connect it up to your NeoCities website like for free. It doesn't cost anything. So that's how I have like the chipperswitch.com, is I just bought the domain and then I connected it up. So yeah, it's making a website. Contrary to every podcast you've ever heard, you do not have to use Squarespace, it turns out. The internet does not exist as only Squarespace.
Yeah, I don't like Squarespace either. Like I have the disgrace of having to work in some of them.
Yeah.
For other companies, and it's not helpful. It's not easy, and it's not quick.
You're losing your potential sponsors, Flavia. Nobody else sponsors videos on the internet except for Squarespace. It's Squarespace and Audible. You burn those bridges,
I'm also known for being very honest, brutal. So it's fine. If I don't like it, I don't want to sponsor either.
Yeah, we're done. Yeah, somebody said they use GitHub pages. GitHub. Yeah. That's interesting. I haven't dived into GitHub enough, but I have seen some cool pages that people have built out of GitHub. I know I'm in danger when I'm on some website and it's hosted on SourceForge. That's when I'm like, I've gone too deep. Have you heard of SourceForge? It's kind of like GitHub before GitHub. Like no. It was like an alternative for it. I think it's still around. It's still a thing. I'm like talking like it's dead, but it's still around. But it will also had something like that where you could like build your own site on it. But generally, when I'm looking at a SourceForge page, it's like, oh man, this is some older software that God help me if I want any support or anything. But anyway, that's like a total digression. But I think this is actually an interesting topic, and it's probably really true with modular stuff, and also like I know you do like repairs for modular and repairs for synthesizers, and that probably involves, it sounds like even if you do know the manufacturer, it's sometimes hard to find like accurate schematics and manuals and that kind of like background information, and that's kind of like an interesting soft skill, right? Is like doing whatever research you need to do to figure out how to use like a particular synthesizer. Like what's your thoughts on that?
As you say, for example, most of the modules I work with, I have worked with manufacturers for 5 years. Mm-hmm. This is kind of like the first time that I'm focusing 100% only in repairs.
I see.
So coming from the production's point of view, a production side where you have the schematics, not always though. I also went through like my own research of stuff because the manufacturers just didn't ever send the schematics, which makes it very difficult. But it was also a good process for me. But likely most of the modules nowadays, they are open source.
I see.
At some point you will have, or you will find someone who had that issue, or just a website when you can see all the coding, or you can see the schematics that is also upgraded, not always, like sometimes. And what I do most of the times is like try to get the schematics first, And usually when I see that there is an issue on, for example, on the audio output, when then I go exactly to where that audio output is in the diagram. But it happens, for example, with other. I had a module that I couldn't find anywhere the schematics actually, and I tried to find it. I even tried to ask some friends like if they had it. Luckily, after I could figure out the issue, what friends said like, "Yeah, I have it." I was like, "Okay, I just already spent like 2 hours on
Yeah,
this."
it's too late now.
Yeah, and the customer is gonna pay for it anyway.
Yeah.
But I had to go through every single point in the PCB to
Yikes.
find the communication and the points of connection in there.
Yikes.
And at the end, it was something super simple, but I had to spend those 2 hours on trying to find like, okay, there is nothing dead. Everything is connected. There is no shortings here. What's happening? At the end, there was like one of the parts that is said like link in there. I was like, you're saying that it's a link in here, but it's not linked. So I, like crossed my fingers, tried to link that one, expecting not to blow it up, and it worked.
Sweet.
We're talking about a module that it never worked. It was built DIY, and I think after 2-3 years, it never worked.
Oh.
One single thing that it was
Wow.
connected in between. So
Okay. So I have an interesting story about this. So I don't know if you've seen this channel before. Her name's Fran Blanche. She has a YouTube channel called Frantone. Or no, it's called Fran Lab. It is such an amazing YouTube channel. Basically, this woman, Fran, has been making guitar pedals for a really long time. She made one of the like big muff guitar pedals for, I think it's, yeah, she made like one of the like most popular big muff models. I forget which it is because I'm not a guitarist, but and then she ran Frantone, which was her own pedal company, and she's does like amazing electronics work, has like a total background in like the old school way to do everything, and like so she knows like how to make circuit boards and like all from scratch, like built in house. Like she just like is the total package of I know how to do a ton of stuff in electronics and I can make stuff like a reality. But
yeah, comes
she's
with
really
experience.
yeah, Frantone. Awesome. Yeah, look up her YouTube channel. It's really, really cool. It's hard to get her gear now because making this kind of boutique stuff in small batches is really, really, really expensive. But check out her YouTube channel. She makes really cool like one-off projects and stuff like that. But she was talking about, so in the United States, there used to be this chain of electronics stores called Radio Shack.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Okay, cool. I never know that if these companies made it out of the United States. And one of the big things about Radio Shack was that you could buy all the components, but you could also buy these kits. And so the idea was, and I'm not talking like, oh, you built a blinky light kit. Like, no. They sold you a kit where you could make a TV, like a tube TV. Like these kits were hard. They were no joke kits.
No.
Like,
making a TV is serious shit, and I'm sorry for saying that. And you can also get highly electrocuted and and tied. And they're not a joke. It's not like building just one module. It's serious.
Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, make your own stereo, like make your own, like there's all these magazines full of these kit projects, where it was like, oh, make your own stereo hi-fi. Like, holy shit. Like, this was like before there was even stereo content to play on it. They'd be like, oh, you make it, like, if you look at early stereo tech, it's literally just, oh, it's two speakers and then there's a delay between them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, stereo. Like, whoa. But like, so anyway, I bring this up because she tells this awesome story. I forget which video it's in, but she talks about these kits and how I guess the idea was that you could get this kit, and then if you tried to build it, let's say you try to build your hi-fi, you're trying to build your TV, right? And it doesn't work. You could send it into them and they would like finish building it for you. Now, could you imagine that? You're like a 12-year-old kid. You
That
get
is
your
the
TV
highlight
kit.
of DIY. It's like that you don't find that right now in the Eurorack world. If you build something and it doesn't work, then good luck. You can figure out
Yeah.
and in the best case, you can actually get help from the manufacturer, who's always like, I found them like sometimes they're super nice. But if you don't have much knowledge about electronics and you don't even know how to read the schematics, then good luck with that.
Yeah. So this was like, these were kits for like 16-year-olds. And they would like send you this kit, and it would have all the parts, and you'd try to make your TV or whatever, and then you would send it back in. Like people would say, oh, it doesn't work, right? And these were mass market enough that, and they were a big enough company that they had like a repair center. Now, could you imagine that being your job? Like you're an electrical engineer or whatever, and it's your job to fix like Timmy's TV that he tried to solder together on Christmas Day. Like,
I love that.
who'd never built a kit before, or maybe had built a little clock radio, you know, and now you're supposed to go in and troubleshoot this whole freaking thing. I mean, of course you have the right schematics and all the parts you want, so that's cool, but God knows what's wrong with this thing, you know? And evidently they were very grumpy after Christmas. That was like not the time to try and call, you know, Radio Shack and convince them to like, you know, do anything, because all the repair guys were up to their elbows in broken or misconstructed, you know, badly constructed, you know, I'll say broken in quotes, basically misconstructed electronic products. So the story you brought up about, you know, somebody's, you know, modular component that's built wrong, it's like, I that's hard work, and I recognize that that's hard work, and I'm lucky enough to have a brother who's into electronics and, you know, helps me like repair stuff and figure out how to, you know, he's into like ROM chips and, you know, how to replace the firmware on synthesizers and stuff, which is hilarious that back in the day, man, if you wanted a system update for your synthesizer, man, you had to go to the dealer. You had to like go and like talk to them and be like, well, you might not even know that there was a firmware update. Like you had to go to the music shop, and either they had to recognize that you had bought something in the past, or you had sent in like a warranty card or something, you know, and maybe if you hadn't changed addresses since the last time you sent in that card.
Yes. Yeah.
You could get like a little EEPROM. They would send you a little EEPROM, you know, for free, and then you'd have to open up your synthesizer, and you had to pull the old one out, and you had to put the new one in, and, you know, it's like we take it for granted now. It's like, oh yeah, it's USB, hook it up, bing bang boom, you know.
Download it and it's fine. It goes instantly. It goes
like bling bling, and then you have your new version, you know, that has way more stuff on it and blah blah blah. It does, you know, now has mini capability. You know, that was not a thing. You know, they might fix a couple things. You know, they might do a different, you know, new firmware versions, but that was that brief honeymoon period of digital synths before, you know, before the internet, when it was like, yeah, I mean, that was considered a luxury, right? Like back in the day, like, man, if you, those old analog synths, man, if something's weird about the design, like that's built into it. Like,
we are
good luck.
Today, like, it's still a very, how to say that? I always say that our industry is a luxury industry. It's part of to me, it's part of the luxury industry, because whether like we do have like, thanks God, like in the last years, we had all these like big, amazing, huge range of synthesizers for different prices. Like you can actually buy, for example, the Leven, you can buy it, and it can be your first synthesizer, which is awesome. I think it's actually really, really well done product, because I think it's very unique. For example, it's not just another type of synthesis or with another sequencer or just another drum machine, but I find that you need to be very creative nowadays to make it, because there is so much, but we are still in a very luxury business, because even though electronic music is very common and nowadays, and is the most thing that everybody listens to, it is still very expensive.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. Like, once you get your synthesizer, then you will have to spend your time on learning that, and time still equals money at the end. Then you will have to get somehow a headphone, even though like you starting slowly. At the end, if you really get into it, like we all do, or even like
Yeah.
getting modular, it will get pricey. So getting a new mixer at the end, and you getting a new drum machine, getting a synthesizer that you like many people does save a lot of money for months to get the synthesizer they want. And I have done that, and I even like spent the first 2 years building my module slowly. Then, and once I realized the system I had, it was like, how much money have I spent in here? Like, I will never
Yeah.
would have thought in my mind that I'm gonna spend this, like, like 3,000 euros right now in like a synthesizer. But you do spend that amount of money in 2 years, for example, and you need the case, and then you need the cables, and then you need, like, also like spending 100 euros in just like mini jack cables. It sounds so stupid, but at the end it's like, what, 5, 10, 20 cables what you get for that amount of price. And then and then you end up like upgrading. So in my opinion, still a very luxury business that has grown, but it's still luxury. And we are very lucky to be able to work in this industry and to put out there all these different machines and machines/instruments that have a very unique personality for every person.
I mean, just like the democratization of hardware, it's just like the fact now that, there's these DSP, chips, what do they call it? There's like, for example, like a lot of products use this thing called the black thin board, which is like a special DSP little like system on a chip deal. Just like the fact that it's all like gotten like way more accessible. Even if you're going to do analog stuff, the data is, the schematics are out there, especially for a lot of guitar pedals and stuff, the classic ones like fuzzes and overdrives and stuff. I mean, there's various different mojo to different ones, and specific components or whatever. But just the way that gear has become democratized. And also, if you want to make a digital pedal and use a black thin board, and you want to learn about, DSP code, and you want to dive into that, like, that's way easier than it was, when it was.
Yes, you don't have to be worried about like spending all these, I don't know, like now 9,000 euros in, I don't know, it's one drum machine or just one synthesizer, and be able to actually like maintain it through the years, because that you had to count on that too, like be able to, like clean it up, because it cost me like all this amount of money, and then next year I will have to keep up and then upgrade it and then wait. And right now it's very easy to have this type of stuff.
Yeah, like when you look at those dudes like Junkie XL and stuff who have those enormous studios of all that 90s rack mount stuff, like huge modular synthesizer, huge collection of like crazy synths, like synths that are like one and only, like, oh, this is one of 3 prototypes, whatever. Like, that guy must pay so much in maintenance.
Yeah.
Because not only are all those synthesizers like pretty old and pretty temperamental, but like the people who know how to fix those old monster analog synths, there's not that many of them.
No.
I
have an example for this, and it's actually do you know the Tonto?
Toto?
Tonto, yeah. Okay. Right now, the system is in Canada, in Alberta, in the not Museum of History, I think it is. It's in a museum in Alberta. I don't remember.
Yeah. Just to clarify, this is the big modular system that Stevie Wonder used, right? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yes. So the thing is that Malcolm, the creator of the system, he was saying to me, he's 83 years old now, and he was saying to me, I have so much trouble with this system because it's huge, and I spent 5 years, I spent a lot of years training someone who could open the synthesizer, open the whole system, clean it up, maintain it. And, like I spent, this is not written anywhere, and there is no manual for this. So he literally passed all of this information to that man so he could maintain technically that synthesizer, the whole system. And he passed away.
Oh, wow.
He-
Yikes.
He died
Oh,
3 years ago.
that's so sad.
Yeah, and he was
And
saying,
not just for the synthesizer, but just
For the
that
whole-
somebody spent
for
all
the
that time
whole-
learning it, and then hopefully
Life,
those were positive years in their life.
Yep. He spent
Yeesh.
so much time and so many years training that person, and he was the only one who could actually he even we're talking about cables, wires that are connecting modules in between this big, and he had to remake them all, he had to desolder them all, and to maintain the system, which is in Canada. And then the man passes away with all of this information in his head. And unluckily, at the same time, he was telling me, I will, we were talking about this, and he was saying to me, I'm so lucky when it comes to this, because he had a training in July in Canada, and he wanted me to go there. But thanks to these awesome pandemic times we're having right now,
Oh,
it's completely.
oh, that hurts. Yikes.
It's and I told him well, you will have to write it down somewhere, and you
And
will
now you have to be interviewing this schmuck instead of learning how to use the godfather of synthesizers. This schmuck talking about his K4R like it's the cat's pajamas.
So it was it was really upset about that, because they were talking about a synthesizer that is so much money, and when he passes away, which I'm touching wood that doesn't happen soon, there will be no one with that knowledge to maintain that synthesizer. And we don't think about that these days. We don't, and we're talking about, it's a mix between the ARP and the Surge and the Moog, and he made it so they could talk to each other. But we don't have that nowadays. We just buy a synthesizer, even if it's the second-hand, a vintage one. We don't think about oh yeah, there's people out there who can fix it. I can just pay someone and he will know how to fix it. That is very, very unique what we have right now. That amount of knowledge that as we have access to.
Yeah.
So things have changed a lot in that sense. But I want to actually ask you something related to the leave-in, actually.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
let me just grab it. I have it down here. The new one. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, this is the newest model with the new silk on it. It'll be a little different on the production run, but anyway, continue.
When did you start working for Sonicware, and which was your first project with them? It has been the leave-in, or was it with the ELZ?
ELZ1, yeah, you got it. Yeah, it's so actually hasn't been that long. So I started I met you, Endo, probably about 2.5 years ago at the NAMM show. I was there with a different company, and we were all so. Basically, for those who haven't been to NAMM, it's like if you've ever been in a Costco warehouse before, it's like 3 Costco warehouses all smashed together, and it's 3 floors, and it's all musical equipment.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking synthesizers, it's like
Anything.
drum sets, saxophones, plug-in manufacturers,
Anything.
guitars, like it's totally insane, and it's like where you catch gear acquisition syndrome. If you didn't already have it when you got there, you got it when you leave. It's bad.
That's
So
like synthorexia.
yeah. Yes. No, true. You starve yourself for the synth. Yeah. It's. I just made that connection. I see. I understand it now. So anyway, I got invited to go to the NAMM show with the company, and we were like, so there's like all the floors, and then there's like the basement of NAMM, which is like a combination of like random Chinese manufacturers selling like PA systems with LEDs in them, and weird
Weird stuff.
weird stuff. Like companies who've just started making like electric guitars, or just started making acoustic guitars, or have some cool gadget or whatever, or sell really fancy guitar picks, or it's just like all this just total mishmash of stuff. And it's the ground floor, man. That's like you pony up your small budget to pitch your product. So I was there with a guitar pedal company, and on my breaks, I just kind of wandered around NAMM and met different people. And Endo had this like tiny booth, and it was Endo and this guy Aaron Isgar. I'm probably butchering his last name, but he's a great guy. He's a translator, Japanese translator, and does a bunch of translations for manuals and stuff like that.
Okay.
So he's kind of got a niche translating thing. But it was them two, and they were showing like a really early prototype of the ELZ1 that's basically the same shape. It's the same form factor, but the firmware was like in a really early stage, and the keys were like really loose, and he hadn't kind of figured out the key mechanism yet. So like I said earlier, I just tried it out, and it was really interesting, and I liked the form factor, and I was just really enthusiastic about it. And I had put on some headphones and just like tried it out, and it was kind of in retrospect, it was kind of my moment to show that I was a sound designer and I knew what I was doing. So I kind of messed around with the original, what I could build from that really early firmware. And I just like built a couple patches and was like, hey, check this out. I did arpeggio, and then I did like a delay that was, it was like a quarter note arpeggiator, and then I did like a 16th note delay. So like it kind of had this interesting alternating kind of feel. Anyway, so I met him, and I gave him my card, and I gave him like I had like a little handbill, it's like a little, almost like from like a concert, like a little tiny thing. And I gave it to him, and I said, hey, I really like the synth, I think it's really interesting, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to work with you, sometime, but good luck with your product, blah, blah, blah. I didn't even really know if it was going to work out or not. So I gave him my card, and then just throughout the show, because I was there for 3 days, I just like checked back in and say, hey, how are things going? Just being a good neighbor. And that's also where, that was the same show that I met Steve Bragg, who's from Empress Effects, who makes the Zoya, which is one of the other products that I did sound design for. It was kind of the same situation. I was like, this is a really cool product. It's really new. I want to know, like, can I build a polyphonic synthesizer on it? And they were like, maybe. And I just went there, and I just spent a couple hours just goofing around with it and asking like the guys there. Their support staff is so nice. So yeah, I just wanted to build like a little polyphonic synth in there. And so, and I was really into like, oh, voice allocation. Whoa, this is a cool thing that polyphonic synths do. And I was like, can you do it in here? Trying to figure out how to build it and just brainstorming with the guys there at the booth and talking to. So that's the thing about going to these trade shows. Like the CEOs and the guys who are really passionate about this stuff are there. You can nerd out with them. Like that's the value of going to these shows. They're expensive and the food is not great and they're in weird places, but you have a chance to kind of interface with these people who would otherwise be totally inaccessible, So anyway, which is hilarious because while I was working on that polyphonic patch, if you go back and find the really early Cuckoo video from like 2018, where he's like showing like interviewing Steve Bragg and talking about the Zoya for the first time. This was like when it was still really early. It's funny because he was talking to me and we were like trying to figure out how to do the voice allocation on the Zoya. And he goes, hold on, Cuckoo's here. I have to do an interview. So he grabs his Cliff Bar and he's like, I haven't had lunch. He grabs his Cliff Bar and he's interviewing Cuckoo. And if you look in the back, I'm right next to them, just working on the Zoya and trying to I'm just like racking my brain, trying to work it out. So there's me, I can see all my leather jacket on. I'm just like in the background. It was so funny because I didn't even know I was going to be in the background of the shot. So that's like my little 10 seconds of fame is me trying to rack my brain to figure out how to use the Zoya prototype at NAMM. So anyway, but I'm totally digressing. But yeah, that was NAMM 20. Let's see. So we just did NAMM 2020. So that was NAMM 2019.
Yeah, because the Zoya was last year, right?
No, it was 2018 because I went twice with the Guitar Pedal Company and then. Yeah, and then this year was the first year I went with Sonicware. So anyway, I met them, and then that year in 2018, I somehow convinced Steve Bragg to allow me to do a tutorial video for the Zoya, which you can look up. It's Zoya for guitarists. So I did a video just breaking down how I built patches for the Zoya, from square one. Here's how you place modules, here's how you connect things, here's kind of the overall logic of it. And I tried to break it down for people who have no modular synth knowledge at all. So that I don't want to toot my own horn, but I spent a lot of time on that video, so definitely check it out. So anyway, I worked for them and I made that video, and that was my first big tutorial video that I ever did. I was first time using 4K video camera. I invested on the once I got that gig, I was okay, I'm gonna this is gonna be really good. I'm gonna record it in 4K and I'm gonna take it and downscale it to 1080p so it looks really nice. And I had this whole crazy rig and all this lighting trying to just kind of jerry rig it together. I think I spent more money on gear than I got paid for that video, but it was an investment because I'm using all that same gear now for ELC1 and Liven content. But that was a leap of faith. Okay, I think I can do this, So anyway, what happened was I made that video, and then it was then later, I think so it was 2018 that I met them, and then I think it was late 2019 or sometime maybe early 2019. I'm not sure. I was planning to go to Japan because I'm involved in a sister city program with Richmond, that's a local town, and Shimada, which is a town in Japan. That they've been sister cities for 40 years or something. I had gone to Japan as a high schooler as part of a foreign exchange program. So now I'm an adult and I help volunteer for the program. And so anyway, I was going there anyway, and my brother speaks Japanese and he's really into Japanese culture and stuff like that. So we went on a trip together to Japan with a couple friends, and I knew that the Zoya was selling in Japan. That there must be a distributor. And I knew that, and from the website, the Sonicware website, I could tell that maybe they didn't have a lot of distribution kind of stuff worked out at that point. So what I did was I called the Empress guys and I was like, hey, I'm going to be in Japan. I was curious, if you have a Japanese distributor, and it would be kind of cool to meet them and talk about, the Zoya some more and talk about kind of the patches and blah, 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 because some of my patches were on the factory one. So I just talked to them about that. And so they gave me the information about who the distributor was in Japan. And so I was just going to go meet them and talk about the Zoya or whatever. But then I kind of made the connection. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to talk to this distributor anyway. Why don't I contact Sonicware and see if they want me to show the ELZ1?
All right.
Because they didn't, I think they had maybe heard of it, but they didn't know anything about it. So kind of like the Zoya was like my foot in the door, right? To show like, oh, I'm professional. I've already worked with the product you're already selling, blah, blah, blah. But then I could bring in the ELZ1 and be like, hey, here's this other thing I'm working on. It's based in Japan. This is a company that you could potentially work with, and here's what it sounds like. And, they ended up thinking it was cool, and, being into it. And so that was kind of my opportunity to like make a connection, right? So, but before I even showed it, I just contacted Sonicware and I was like, hey, I have this opportunity, I could show the ELZ1, and so they like let me borrow one. And so I was like in this little hostel, like being like, okay, I got to make like 5 or 10 patches here that I can show to this distributor. I'm like literally on the hotel bed with my like headphones on, like being like, okay, I got to learn the synth. Because I had never used it before then. Right. I had no, because I hadn't bought one. So I was like, all right, shit, I got to make some. So I spent a day just like making patches and like trying to like learn how to use. And thankfully, the ELZ1 has a really awesome interface and it's really quick that's its whole deal, is that it's really fast to program. So I was able to make some patches, and then then I think it was like, a couple of days later, we took this trip out to the kind of boonies of Tokyo and showed the synthesizer to the distributor, and they really liked it. And I got a tour of their like collection of weird guitar pedals and stuff. And I just made that connection. I was like, here, and Sonicware gave me a unit to give to the distributor. So nice. I was like, hey, here, you can keep it, and so we made that connection, and and then they connected separately after that to work out, or I'm not sure exactly what the results were of them working together or contacting each other. But anyway, I made myself really, really useful. That is what manufacturers want, right? They want somebody who's like has some initiative. Of course, I didn't do any of this stuff without asking. I didn't just like show up and was like, here, I'm a representative, blah, 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 and just talk a bunch of mess like that I had no business talking about. I kind of went through the right channels. I said, okay, I got permission from, and information from Empress first, right? I was like, hey, I was wondering, blah, blah, blah. I'll be in the area. It would be interesting to talk to them, So I went through the right channels, and they said, yeah, here's information, here's their email, feel free to reach out to them, blah, blah, blah. So then it was like, I'm not just, going and, saying that I'm blah, blah, blah. And like, I went through the right channels and asked for the right permission. And then through doing that, things just happen to line up. Sometimes you do those kind of lineup things and they don't work out for whatever reason. Like there's always various factors involved. But anyway, so once I kind of made that connection happen, and I showed that I had initiative. And mind you, I'm doing all this for free. I'm not at this point. I'm not getting paid by anybody to do any of this. I mean, the Zoya video, yeah, but nothing else. None of this networking stuff is paying me anything. So once I kind of proved that I was really useful, that's when kind of Endo kind of realized that I could potentially be an asset for their team. And so at that point, I talked to them about making sounds for the ELC1, and then we're still kind of working on a new bank of sounds for the ELC1. But he after that year, I think it was. The timeline is escaping me, but anyway, he invited me to go to NAMM with his company, and so I went to NAMM with Endo and the team in 2020 in January, and so that's when I you get paid to help man the booth. Now, mind you, the first company I was working with, where I went to NAMM, I didn't get paid, so I worked for 2 years, full booth. Down in the basement, losing my voice, demoing guitar pedals for 2 years, no money. I even paid my transit to get down there, and my hotel. No money. That was a money pit for sure, but it was networking. So,
I think
it's proofs in the pudding, but anyway.
Let me I'm going to stop it here just 1 second and you continue because this is very interesting. Yeah. But there are two things that I would like to highlight about this industry for anyone who wants to get into it. One, for anything that you want to do in this life, mostly when it comes to music, you got to invest time and you're going to invest your money. That if you make the equation between networking and investment of money and time, then you're gonna get somewhere. That's for sure. For me, it was the same. I had all the money that I was earning from my jobs, which I had a lot of work because I've been a freelancer for a long time. All the money was going to buy my modular and to buy airplane tickets to go to every single event, synth event or synth festival that it was all around Europe. I spent literally 2 years traveling like a crazy MF, just trying to be there. I didn't have any intention of, I'm going to make a networking and I'm going to get a job here. I just wanted to know more, get to know people more, get to know the community, learn more about everything. And at some point, that investment of money paid off. And I also made a lot of works that were for free, so to say. I invested actually, even though the little money that I got from, I worked so many hours that it was not balanced anyway. But it's an investment you have to do. At the same time, it shows that how the industry is so unbalanced in that sense. How they know that there is so many people out there that want to get into this industry. There is many people out there that's passionate about it. So they actually, I'm not going to say taking advantage of that, but there is so much of that. And especially nowadays, there is so many people, even YouTubers and demo people who just want to be in and just want to be recognized and known, that the manufacturers don't even have to pay for that type of promotion, for a video or for a workshop or for anything. And that happened to me too. Manufacturers don't pay. Something.
Yeah.
When you get to find actually one that actually values your job, and it's very difficult to find that company or that person, then at some point you will have to also value yourself and say, this is the knowledge I have, this is the value I'm going to give to your company, we're going to talk about numbers. So you can continue from there.
No, I think that's really true. It's like, yeah, it's hard to find that point. It's really hard to find that point where you're like, okay, I'm doing a lot of stuff for free. You know, at what point do we have a relationship wherein, or you've taken on enough responsibility regularly for a company that, not to say that regularity is a requirement for getting paid, but you kind of hit this point where there's almost kind of a little bit of a dependency almost. And like, you're a key part of their whole deal. At that point, you know, it's important that you have that conversation about, you know, how am I going to get paid? Am I getting paid a percentage of sales of this thing that we're making? Am I getting paid hourly? Am I getting paid on a per project basis? What's happening? Because if you don't do that, most people have some kind of day job, right? It's like to bring in money. You know, I've had various day jobs and stuff, you know, doing very boring stuff, which we talked about before the call. So there's a tendency to just be like, well, that's my money source and this is my fun project thing. No, it's work. You're working.
Yes.
You're working for this
and
company.
They are a company. They're selling a product. They're a business.
Yeah,
So
they have margins. They have expenses.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but at least for me in my psychology, there is a burnout point where if you're putting in all this extra time on top of your day job and you're not getting paid for this and you're working, you know,
12 hours.
On top, yeah. Or, you know, you're working your 40-hour-a-week job and then you're working another 20 hours a week for some company. Okay. You're working 60 hours a week. You're not really getting paid anymore. You're eating into your own time, like, time. You don't have time to do any of your own projects or sleep or eat or do the things you need to do to stay healthy and not be burned out and not be bitter. Because what will happen is you'll keep doing that and then you'll hit a point where it's like
limits.
It's not fun to work in this industry anymore. It's not fun to work for this company, and you're going to get testy and you're going to get bitter. And then the company's going to be like, whoa, what happened to this guy? You know, this guy used to be really all about doing all this stuff, and now they're missing deadlines and they're grumpy and they're, you know, have a bad attitude. And, you know, and that's because you've pushed yourself, you know, and a good company will realize this, right? But they may not, right? They're not mind readers. So you have to have that conversation with the company at some point where you're like, hey, you know, I've put in this amount of time and I've really put in a lot of, you know, sweat hours into this. And I feel like I need to find a way to make this sustainable for me, you know, and in my life and the cost of living where I live. Because they may not know that there's a high cost of living where you live because everybody's like international now. So, I mean, that's kind of what I talked to Sonicware about. I was like, hey, we need to work something out here. And, you know, Endo's like super honest, straight up guy who's not trying to rip you off, who's really cares about like how you're doing and your opinion on stuff. Like, that's why I love working for Sonicware, is because Endo's just like the man, and and I don't even mean that in a like gendered way, like he's a man. No, he's like,
I know, like he's a good boss to have.
Yeah, he's a good boss, and he cares about his employees, and you know, he really cares about the product, and he wants to know what you think. And so we kind of worked out, you know, a deal where working for Sonicware can be a sustainable thing for me, you know, and I can spend more time on it, and I can have a sense of like, okay, I'm working towards a sustainable career for myself. And so anyway, that's kind of the long-term, like the long story of how I worked for Sonicware, was making that connection with the distributor, showing I was really, really useful. And then from there, they've when they've had lots of different things that they've needed to get done. Like right now I'm like heading the North American, just like the American continent distribution for the ELZ1.
All right.
So that's why I had the 100 ELZ1s show up at my house. So we're relaunching it now in the Americas, doing direct sale instead of working through distributors. So
that is so cool.
Yeah, so that's
really, really cool. I'm sorry to cut you there, because I really admire companies. I don't have anything against retailers and distributors, but I do think that companies have lost that power on distribute their own products on the price they want to and have the control of that, instead of like giving into, I don't know, Just Music or Thomann or any other distributor who's just gonna have like thousands of products in their catalog, and they're gonna give any attention to yours specifically. It's just gonna be a number in their Excel, for example.
Yeah.
So I like that. I do like that.
Yeah, and they're so big that it's like I'm not going to talk too much about distributors because honestly I haven't worked with one personally. So anything I really say about working directly with distributors is kind of just like my guesses. So I'm not going to talk too much. I don't want to talk too much about that, but I do know that, like any service, right? Like distributors are a service, right?
Yeah.
So they cost money, and they have their connections are worth money, and the kind of work and networking that they do, and they have their own, contacts that they've built out over a long time. But now that people are getting so used to buying stuff online, and finding a lot of those stores are selling online anyway. So it's a lot of the traditional hurdles that the distributors were bridging, right? The problem that they were solving is less prevalent than it used to be.
Yep.
And so now that people can see all these reviews, because back in the day, the model was company makes product, right? Maybe they make a product based on where they see a gap in the market. Maybe they had a previous model and they're making a new iteration of it. Then they work with a distributor. The distributor says, okay, I know all these retail stores. I know all these independent music shops. I work with whoever, right? And then you work with them and you set the manufacturer's recommended retail price. And then what it costs you to manufacture it and provide support. And so then you come to some agreement with them where they get a certain amount of money per unit, right? That has to be less than your margin, right? Has to be some percentage. Like, let's say you're making these numbers are wrong, but let's say you're making a $500 product, right? And then, you can make it for $100, right? Well, that gives you $400 of wiggle room for whatever people
Other
you have.
Is going to have to add up to that profit. Yeah.
Yeah. So your distributor takes $100, then your retailer, they want to be able to make $200 a unit every time they sell it, right? So that's $300 there, right? So there's $300 in middlemen, there's $100 in manufacturing, and you got a $500 product, right? Okay, you make $100 on these,
profit,
you know? Maybe that's enough money to run your company, maybe not, right? But you're losing a fat percentage of that. They're making a lot of money. And so back in the day, that was a big deal because the distributor would take your synthesizer and take it to all these stores and basically pitch it for you. They would say, "Oh, here's how it works. Here's all the marketing materials. Blah blah blah." They were essentially selling it to the music shops, right? Wholesale. So those distributors were really important because if you wanted to get into some key market, you know, or some company that you had no representation in, having somebody who had a list of all the music shops was like, it was essential. You had to have that. Whereas now it's like most people know our product from the internet.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a bunch of reviews out there already, and people are okay with buying something, a big ticket. Like you were saying, essentially a luxury item.
Yeah.
Or a professional tool, depending on how you look at it. You know, or you're a hobbyist, you know, whatever.
They're both to me. It's like
Yeah, it's kind of
whether
yeah.
you can say like if you're a hobbyist, then it's gonna be, you know, like your money that is you have worked really hard to spend it or whatever you feel like. And if you're a professional, you're gonna see it as a tool that is an investment for your own work, but still a luxury business is
Yeah.
it's still a luxury anyway at the end.
Yeah.
So, but
no, I agree.
Okay, let's put it that way. You started working actually this year with Sonicware.
Yeah, probably officially, yeah, starting in NAMM 2020. Yeah.
That is when we met, actually. That's really
cool.
Yeah,
that was like my first like getting paid by Sonicware to do something, like gig, where I was like, oh, cool, like, you know, I don't have to get some god awful Airbnb bunk bed that's not rated for my weight, where I'm sleeping with 3 other people and taking an Uber to the convention center and hoping that my stuff doesn't get stolen. Like, wow. I have a real budget to like book a hotel and like, you know, so that was like so nice. But anyway, on the distribution side, like just to wrap that up. So anyway, the good thing about direct sale now and the fact that there's a million reviews on the internet and people are okay with buying these products is that we can sell our product directly to the people who want it.
Yep.
And if you think about our mythological $500 product, you know, if your manufacturing cost is $100 again, you know, and all of a sudden you've cut out the distributor and you've potentially, we still want to sell in stores because we see immense value in what retailers do. So we're not going to stop selling the ELZ1 like at Perfect Circuit and all retailers that want to sell it. And, you know, but just cutting out that $100 or whatever percentage the distributor is getting allows you potentially to lower the price of the product and make more money, depending on what their percentage is. So that's kind of what's happening with the ELZ1 is that we're relaunching it in North America, doing direct sale and direct wholesale to retailers, so that and it kind of wins for the retailers too, because they can sell it at a lower price also. So it can be like more of an incentive for them, and they can still get a decent margin, right? So it's about like kind of streamlining that supply chain, so that we can sell it directly, and like the consumer wins, the manufacturer wins, and the retailer wins, in that sense. So yeah, I totally spaced on how we started talking about synth retail, but that's kind of how it works. So that's why I'm doing the North American distribution. Yeah, is because, and the reason why I know how to do shipping and stuff is because my business, the chipperswitch.com, is first there's so many stories. First, I worked for a company called rapbay.com that sells like rap CDs, so like music CDs. It still exists. Artists still put out CDs, and they're based here in Richmond. Really cool company. If you're into like 90s and early 2000s California hip hop. They sell a bunch of stuff by all those artists like Mac Dre and stuff. Interestingly, an early pioneer of using synthesizers in hip hop. Although there's even older hip hop synthesizer stuff. You could talk to probably B-Boy Tech Report about that stuff. But he was like one of the West Coast guys using synthesizers to make beats and stuff like that, and doing his own productions. But anyway, I worked for them basically doing shipping. So I was using stamps.com, another internet ad. It's on every podcast in the United States ever. And so I was basically just shipping all day and learning about how to do shipping. And so that's where I learned like how to do like basically e-commerce back end, like shipping crap. And that was a minimum wage job, like it wasn't anything glamorous. I was just copy pasting, shipping information, sending out confirmation emails and shipping stuff and shipping Mac Dre bobbleheads. And, but that's where I learned the skill set of like, or being confident enough to be like, oh yeah, I can figure this out, And so that's how, and then from there I started selling prints for artists and stuff. So I kind of knew the supply chain and how to get boxes and how to ship stuff and how to calculate it and all that jazz. So then eventually, like at NAMM 2020, when, I started kind of learning about how the distribution and the retail and all this stuff works for the ELC1, I had a reference point. And I could also be like, yeah, I can do that for you. If you want to start doing direct sale, yeah, I have space. I can ship these out and I can help you figure out, how to import them and all that stuff. So, yeah, whatever job you're doing, like it all adds up, whatever your skills are. That's why you need a website.
Yep.
Make yourself a website that says you can do this stuff. And not just a LinkedIn, because LinkedIn's are weird and not super useful, but they're kind of useful. But
sometimes,
yeah, they're weird. But
I mean, it's really interesting how somehow in life we all start we all have to work at some point. We were all like 20 years old or 19 or whatever age anyone has started working, and we all had to go through all of these jobs that were just meant for us to get food and to get our payments and our things. But those, to me right now that I go back and I look back, those are really important jobs that actually teach you much more and put you in a position to be able to add that experience to whatever you want to do in the future that is related to your path, that the field that you really want to get into. And at some point, I don't think that anyone has ever think like, oh yeah, I'm going to work in customer service, for example. And then you end up actually applying all the knowledge to your actual job that you are very passionate about it. And it works because you already had the base. So working and getting that knowledge, even though it's not in the field that you want to get, is very important to have that. I think so. I want to ask you 2 more questions, and I think we're just going to cut it out here because we're going to go about 2 hours. It's really interesting.
Forever.
And I think we should
Flavia, I have a list of your 29 questions. No one can say that young Padawan does not do her research. Because she pulled stuff out of here that I didn't even know. She Google translated the Japanese Sonicware website and pulled out quotes that I didn't even know. That I just recently barely learned about Endo's synthesizer philosophy, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was Google English trying to figure out where it is on the site, and it's I was like, "Can you send me a link to that on our own website that I don't know about?" Yeesh. Good. That's journalism right there.
Yeah, Actually, I'm gonna tell you something that nobody knows, and is that when I was 18 years old, I made the bar in the US, like the test to access university,
Oh,
and
okay.
and I was, in Spain. Then you have one in June and then one in September. But the school, that the university actually starts at the end of September. So I was already late when I did the bar, and I had only two choices. One was law school, well, university, and the other one was journalism.
Ah.
And I did law.
uh,
But I love journalism too, and I do love, like, getting like all this information.
yeah.
So don't worry about, like, we talked about this. Like, I always send, like, for anyone who's actually watching, it's not that these interviews are made up. I just like to have a few questions that I
Yeah.
personally like to show and highlight from the guest. And there you had like 29 questions.
No, it was good because it like made me think about like the different topics, and like that's why I had the whole like cam set up to show my like my rack or whatever, because I was like, oh man, I got to be able to like, oh, this is hilarious. But I'll show you this for a second. Hold on, just because
Okay.
it's funny. So I was like, oh man, Flavia's gonna ask me about all this gear. I gotta be able to like show it. And so I have like right next to my desk here, I have like all this gear on the ground, because I was like, okay, she might ask me about MIDI controllers. She might ask me about like Sonicware stuff. She might ask me about the Zoya or whatever. So I like piled it all up here just in case, like, so I can go like, oh, I just happen to have that. So that was like, but that's that because you had sent me all those questions, and I was like, oh man, this is like, not that I didn't think it was real before, but I was like, I better be ready.
That's
She's
really cool,
she's
though.
ready to hit me with the good questions, so but that shows you, like, when you project, not project, but you make it tangible that you're a professional and you're real.
Mhm.
People react to that because they're like, oh, okay, I got to bring my A+++ game, because this person's doing it, and that's true with networking. Like, if you show up and you're like, got your card, you got all your stuff, you've shown, that you're legit, people react to that, and then they want to act professional around you, you set the tone. But anyway, to continue about journalism and stuff.
I told you that, like, probably many of these questions won't be asked, but I do want to ask you
Yeah,
at
sure.
least one more, and then I guess we just.
I mean, I have plenty of time here, so you're welcome to extend this as long as you are comfortable. Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you about the designing process when it comes to sound. When you are actually let's talk about, for example, the living. How it is for you, that process when you're actually because it's not the same when you're going to yourself. It's not the same when you're actually making music. So how it is for you to do it that knowing that it's going to be commercially, that it's going to be something with a target, that it should be adapted to the machine, and that instrument is going to go out to a very specific target of people.
Yeah. It kind of depends. I mean, it really depends on what the manufacturer wants. Like, what's their target audience? Are these supposed to just be flashy? Is the goal of these presets to be like somebody who's, trying this for 10 seconds at Guitar Center is like, wow, that's cool. I want to try using this for another 10 minutes at the store. Or is the goal like, oh, I want to make a really usable palette for people who are, making songs or whatever, right? Those are very different presets, right? Like, that's the joke, right? You have your synthesizer and you press one key and it plays the whole song, right? Like, those presets are there and the ones that have all the sequencing in it to grab you, right? And be like, it's almost like a demo song. It's like a demo song you can play, right? Those patches are not super useful from a compositional standpoint, right? But they serve a certain function. So like with the Liven, most of the content I've done so far is like demo songs to kind of show like, oh, here's how you can layer things up. For those of you who don't know, essentially the Liven is a mashup between a sequencer, an 8-bit synth, and an audio looper. So the general workflow is that you make your sequence, your 128-step sequence, then you can tweak it and do all your like parameter locking, like Elektron style. And then you can save that pattern and sound together into like a slot. And then you can record that into an audio loop. And there's 4 audio loop tracks. So you record that into an audio loop so that you can then clear the sequencer and keep that loop going in the background, but then you can clear the sequencer and come up with a new part. So that kind of workflow allows you to have a synth that's, 6, I think it's 4-voice polyphonic, but then you can build up a bunch of tracks kind of like you would on a workstation or something like that, and build up a composition that way.
The sequencer, is it intended to be Elektron-alike?
That I don't know, because what's funny is when I went to Japan last October, he was like, I'm working on a new product and I can't talk about it. And I was like, oh, cool. Like at this point, the ELC was out, like on the market. But he was like, it's a cool product, but I can't talk about it. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, I really freaking want to know what it is, but that's cool. Like, I get it. You want to keep this kind of stuff under wraps. So anyway, I didn't really know what the Liven, I didn't know what the new product was until like a week before NAMM, I think. And I didn't have a prototype to like work on. Like, I didn't like, the first time I used the Liven was like the day before NAMM started.
All right.
So yeah, but the joke in the industry is without NAMM, no hardware would ever come to market.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have to have, and that was the thing, because they realized, like Shinya, who's the lead engineer in Uendo, kind of realized,
if they don't show it there,
well, yeah, that they have like, if they need to show it, right? They don't want to wait another year, but the amount of time that they had to crank it out and to get a prototype manufactured and shipped to Japan and then, tested and figured out. And then, like let's just say they pushed through some holidays to make that happen. And it was very tight which is why, I myself and the other people at the booth didn't have prototype units, before, because it was like, you're pushing your deadline, you're pushing your hardware as hard as you can, trying to get it to a state where the general public can use it and these journalists can use it without it just randomly breaking, because that's a disaster. You have somebody on Sound trying out your synthesizer in your small brand and it breaks in the video. Oof.
Yeah.
So it's like
not right.
So anyway, so
but
that's
very common too. That there's someone who's gonna make a review and then it comes and there's something not working out because it's a prototype. So it happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
But it's not nice. For the manufacturer, it's not nice, I think.
Yeah, it's just like nerve-wracking because we got more like coverage than we'd gotten like previous years for sure. And I think it was because of the hype around, because we had done the Kickstarter like right before NAMM. So it was like running during NAMM. And so and it was getting funded like pretty rapidly. So that kind of helped us because then the journalists had something to like latch onto because they were like, oh, I've heard about it from the Kickstarter. You know, how's your funding goal? Like they had conversation points to talk to us about before they like. It was easier for them, I think, to make conversation with us because we had a roadmap already. You know, and we also already had a proven product. You know, it was the third year at NAMM. It also helped that we had like a cornered booth in like a pretty well trafficked area. So that really helped too, just with general traffic. Let me tell you, booths at NAMM are freaking expensive.
I know
like,
that.
I forget the exact numbers, but like it was expensive enough that like, you know, it was plausible to get like the Japanese government to like help subsidize your booth costs. Like it's really expensive for the corner booth that we had and like the double booth. It was like no joke amount of money. Yeah, you're probably totally aware of that. So anyway, but we were talking about sound design. So yeah, for the live and for me, I've mostly done song demos so far. So I've tried to make that because I'm doing it within the context of a song and I don't have to show off each sound as being like its own jaw-dropping, you know, scalp-grabbing thing. I was able to kind of build sounds that were more practical and like would actually work within a track. So that's been actually really fun about the Liven is because we're trying to showcase that it's a performance tool and then you use it to build songs. I've been able to like build sounds that are actually useful in a song, which has been really liberating. And I just like I like the workflow of it. I like that I can just like get up in the morning and like lay in bed and use it and have some headphones on and like build a song. And I like the fact that, you know, there are other desktop synths, you know, like Monotrons and stuff like that, or I really like that Korg kit that you build yourself, the little tiny synth. It's called like the NK something or other. That thing is awesome, but it has no preset memory. So you build an awesome sound on there and then you turn it off and it's gone. It's so sad. It leaves you with this like sad feeling at the end of using it versus a happy feeling. So like, that's what I like about the Liven is that you can build your whole song and like, yeah, it's using audio loops, right? It's not sequencing all the tracks, but you can save the sound and the pattern together. So if you come up with a cool bass line and a cool bass sound, you can just recall it and it's like back right there. And like, that's what I like. That was my process for making the demo videos for the Liven was I just made tracks. Like I just made songs on it. Like I made like sounds that I thought were interesting, and then I just slowly built up songs, and then I, you know, used some other gear and did some other processing for fun and stuff like that. And so that's what I like about the Liven, and what I actually really like about Sonicware is that I like working with the product. You know, it's fun. It's not menu divey. It's not glitchy. It's fun. Like that's what this is about. It's about having fun. You know, sometimes I get lost in like this is some cool ass weird VST from the 90s, or this is some weird digital synth that, you know, sounds really cool because it has dithering and it's doing, you know, has low sample rate and blah, blah, blah. And you get caught up in all the like the details and all the like minutia and specs and all that crap. And then, you know, but then you realize, oh, I've spent 2 months or 3 months like nerding out about something that's like not even really that important, you know, or is important in some kind of niche, interesting way, but doesn't help you make music at all, really. And you kind of wake up and you realize, oh man, the number of, you know, hoops that I'm jumping through to use this old synth is like crazy. Like this is kind of embarrassing, but I have like a Yamaha SY35, which is like basically like not the first, but it's one of the first like commercially successful-ish vector synthesizers. So what that means is there's just 4 sounds, and then you use like a little joystick, and then you can go between the 4 like sound sources. So I picked one up at a pawn shop or at like a used recycling center kind of shop that's super, like the keys are all completely smashed. And well, not smashed, but several of them are in serious disrepair. And it's a cool old synth, and it's has interesting history, and it sounds kind of cool. It sounds pretty cool. But man, like, I made a whole like tutorial website on how to use this synthesizer. I haven't even used it in any songs. What am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Like, I just nerded out for like so long. I built a website about this. Like, I was like in Internet Archive, like looking at like old forum posts from people who like haven't like, you know, who might not even still be alive, you know, debating on which one of these models is the best, or, you know, talking about editor software for this. You know, this thing has the worst MIDI sysx implementation I've ever seen. Like, you do more than one thing at once and it just locks out. Like, it's just like, nope, can't take any more MIDI messages, control messages, like, bye. Like, I spend way too much time working. Does it sound cool? Yes. But that's what I like about Sonicware stuff, is that it's just like, it works and it's fun to use, and I don't have to jump through a million hoops to make it work. And it still has that interesting signature sound that I like. And I don't know, I'm just ranting, but I spent...
No, but I agree with you. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end, you know, you do spend a lot of time with them, and not for the purposes only. There's something that I do talk a lot about this with my partner, and is synthesizers. And I think I mentioned this to you. They have to be fun. When somebody has an idea in their head about, oh, I want to make this sound, or I'm going to make this track, or that's something that is in there, that it has to be, it's going to translate in the sound of the synthesizer. So if you spend too much time trying to figure it out, or trying to program, or diving into the menu, or just every single synthesizer has its own learning process. We know that. But if you spend way too much time to actually get to the point that you are losing your creativity, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. So that's actually, I remember when you were showing me the live, and that I thought this is not only sounds really cool, because I do love the sound, but it seems that it's actually very funny and playful to use. And that when you're having fun with something, then you can spend your mind and your thoughts and your creativity to come up with something new, and something that you don't even thought. I like to actually expand that, instead of like being really hard on like learning the machine more than making music. I think it needs to be balanced at some point. So
yeah, I agree.
I like to ask you something, because we're talking about this and you do know also a lot of history. If you ever had the chance to design your own synthesizer, how would it be?
Oh man, that's a great question to ask a sound designer, or really any synth nerd. So this is going to get into the weeds, but the first synthesizer for me that was just like, holy God, is the Oberheim 8 voice.
Okay.
It was a relatively early polyphonic synth by Tom Oberheim. And essentially, it's a bunch of monophonic synths like wired together into one kind of unit that served as a keyboard and kind of as a voice allocator. If you look up like Oberheim 8 voice, you'll see there's this amazing demo of it. And they talk about like what makes it amazing. It is jaw-dropping. Like, you listen to patches on that thing and it's like, holy God. and because each module is like, they call it a SEM module. It's these white modules. And they're all independent. So you have to tune them all together.
Yeah.
So each one of those white things is its own synthesizer. So the idea is that you have to tune them all.
Yeah.
And they're all their own analog synths, so they all have like their own weird drift and issues, you know? So the idea is that you would tune the whole instrument, and then, you know, either you could play it so that there was like round robin, essentially, voice allocation. So like every time you hit a note, it's going to play it on a different one of those modules. Or you can have it like be monophonic, but play all of the modules at the same time. So it's like an 8 oscillator, like monophonic synth. So you can go either way. That thing is kind of, for me, is kind of like that thing's like the goal, you know, like that's, you know, I will never own one of these for several reasons. Number one, they're really, really expensive. Yeah. Number two, they're probably a maintenance nightmare. Number three, there's no preset. You can't save presets on it. Number four, yeah, it doesn't self-tune, so you have to tune every module.
Yeah, if you have to tune every oscillator to be able to play something, we're going back to the same thing. Stop being fun when you're actually ready to play.
Exactly. Like the joke in the demo video that I watched is like the sound tech is just like a total hero for lugging that on tour. Like I think Bela Fleck took it on tour. So some poor sound tech had to tune that thing. And keep in mind, this was in the era when like your synthesizer gets too hot, it goes out of tune. Your synthesizer gets too cold, it goes out of tune. Your synthesizer is having a bad day, goes out of tune.
We are still in that era where there's still some modules out there with the oscillator. They still having that issue on the temperature where you don't know that if you're gonna play, I don't know, in Spain in August, it's gonna be too hot, and then you're gonna have a different sound completely. Or you go to Sweden and then it's gonna be super cold and it's gonna be totally different. So, or might not work, or it gets super, super hot and then it actually breaks, which it had happened already. Like, so that's not a synthesizer one that you wanna go around with it, touring.
Yeah.
And then it's very unreliable.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why I'll never own an 8 voice. But what's interesting is I was trying to remake the 8 voice in Reactor.
All right.
First I was using Synth Edit. And then after Synth Edit doesn't have, so for those who don't know, Synth Edit was a program that came out in the 2000s that allowed you to make your own VST synthesizer. And it had a node-based architecture very similar to Reactor. A ton of the old 32-bit VSTs that I love were all built in Synth Edit. Synth Edit came out at some point way later with the 64-bit version. This all wouldn't be a problem if Ableton had a bridge in it that allowed you to use 32-bit plugins in the 64-bit version, but they don't. And they abandoned all that old stuff, all the 32-bit architecture, which totally blows. Anyway, so I first started building it in 32-bit Synth Edit, or 64-bit Synth Edit. And what I realized is essentially there were modules for the 32-bit version that I needed for the voice allocation that didn't exist in the 64-bit version. So I was like, okay, this is a dead end because I can't make the synth that I want to make in Synth Edit 64-bit. So then I jumped to Reactor and I was like, okay, let's see if I can build this in Reactor. Well, you kind of can if you use the Reactor blocks, it's possible, but I generally didn't have a great experience in Reactor. just because it wasn't super designed for what I wanted to do. But there were great people on that forum that kind of gave me an understanding of how the voice allocation was working. And interestingly enough, all that knowledge of trying to build this synth and basically failing to build it was that that's what I was trying to build on the Zoya. That's why I knew enough information to connect with the Zoya people and be like, I've been trying to build this Oberheim 8 voice clone on any platform. How do I do this? And that's why I knew how to talk to them, and I knew how to I knew the background knowledge, and I was like, okay, you can build a synth on here. Do you have any voice allocation? How does that work? Can I, I had done my research just from hobby interest in it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I was trying to build in the Zoya. And you can build that in the Zoya. And because I was on the beta team, I was able to be like, hey, there should be some voice allocation in here. There should be some different options. Let's implement this, which is totally a pet request, by the way. Nobody else was like, that voice allocation idea is a great idea. No, everyone's like
a comment in here.
But because Empress is cool and their devs are really cool, they were like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. How do you want this implemented? Which is literally the most flattering, amazing thing because these devs have so much to do and it's so hard work and they are on some tight ass deadline. So when you suggest some weird ass corner case thing that you want to do because you're a nerd and they not only do it, but ask you how you want it done, that is that never happens. That does not happen. So I was like, hats off to them because they implemented something that allows some really, really cool stuff on the Zoya. But I was like, this is never going to happen, but it's cool anyway. So anyway, so this is my ongoing quest to build my own 8 voice. So after that, I was like, you can make a 4 voice on the Zoya. It has enough gas, CPU to build it in the Zoya. But I was like, okay, that's really cool, but I also want I want this in software. I don't really, this isn't as useful in a hardware unit because I want to be able to make lots of tracks and have duplicates of the same instrument and have preset management and all that stuff. So not that the Zoya doesn't have preset management, it does. Anyway, the platform that I haven't worked on this project in maybe 6 months or a year because I've just have my hands full. But the program that I'm building it in now is called Synth Factory, and it's by this company called Melda Productions. All right. Melda makes so many plugins. If there is an expensive plugin and you want a not expensive version of it that works just as well, if not better, Melda Productions probably has it.
So wait a minute. You're saying that in this case, the synth that you would like to do, it would be a virtual synth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. So that's what I meant by having it on lots of tracks. Yeah. Sorry, that was unclear. So this synth is totally under the radar, but it's called Synth Factory, and it's by Melda Productions. And it does the way that it handles voice allocation is really cool. So right now, most digital synths, right? When you play them polyphonically, they're just duplicating the code or whatever. They're making a new instance of the whole chain, right? The oscillator filter, whatever. They're making a new instance of that chain every time. And so every time you hit a note, every voice is going to be the same. Mm-hmm. From a settings perspective, right? Mm-hmm. All the knobs are going to be in the same position. You might have, per voice LFOs or something, some kind of do that sort of stuff. Depends on how it's built. But there's not a lot you can do there, right? So every voice is going to sound the same, which is why a lot of digital synths sound really clean, which is great. Everything should be in tune. But what's cool about the 8 voice is that because it's basically 8 synthesizers that have all been kind of like weirdly connected together, there's variation in all of their settings, right? Their envelope settings are different. Their filter settings are different. So the cool thing about M Synth Factory is that they allow you to do like have per voice modulation.
Okay.
So, which means that you can have a synthesizer where things are different per note press. So the timbre of your instrument is changing every time you press a note, right? So you can sort of simulate that kind of feeling of all the oscillators being separate voices and like have a different timbre or different level of distortion for every key press. And so you can create these really like alive sounding synthesizers because there's this subtle changes happening per note. That isn't just like an LFO affecting everything. It's like, no, the voice changes a set amount and locks to that every time you're pressing it. It's kind of like, you know, if you have a bunch of singers in a chorus, like every singer's vocal tract is going to be a little different. You can train them all to sing in the same style and you can give them all the same music.
Have the same timbre, they won't have the same intention, they won't have the same harmonics. Yep, I get you.
So like most digital synthesizers now are just like one guy and a bunch of clones of him, right? All singing at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Exact clones. You know? Versus the cool thing about per voice modulation is that it's like having 10 totally different people that are all trained the same and all work together and all like in the same key, but are all have different vocal tracks and have like different kind of slightly different taste, you know? And that's what makes like a cappella so cool. And like that's what makes the 8 voice so cool is that you can make all the voices like separate. And the cool thing about it too is that it can export to VST. So if you use this tool, you can make your own plugin.
Okay.
That's what's mind-blowing about this. It's like all the like every step that I wanted, you know, and I haven't done that part of the process yet, but if you go on the website, like they are willing to like license this out. I mean, you can build like a UI in it. They're willing to license this out. So if you build your own synth in this, you can publish it as its own plugin.
How is it called again? I'm sorry, because I'm going to add this information to the chat.
Yeah, so it's called M Sound Factory.
Okay. It's instantly ML production. Okay.
Yeah, it's so cool. And the cool thing about it is like they have a huge back library of effects. Like that's their whole company is building audio effects. And M Sound Factory has all of them. So the idea is you could build whatever synth you want with all their crazy effects that are totally like legit and like all their sound engines. Like basically you get everything they've ever made in this thing. And then you can leverage that to build your own like super unique, interesting plugin, and then you can sell it. No other synth does that. And the fact that I can build my weird ass 8 voice thing in it that is totally niche.
That is so sick.
Yeah, it's totally sick. And like, I don't understand why nobody talks about Melda Productions. I mean, probably because there's some small company that's like 5 people or 1 person or who knows. But that thing is awesome, and you should use it. And there's cool tutorials online. There's this guitarist guy who does tutorials for it. I wish I could shout him out. But yeah, if you look up his videos on it, he does an amazing job explaining it. Hold on, I just want to look him up because he's helped me so much.
Man, that is pretty sick, man. Seriously. Yeah. There was a comment here saying that tuning fan sounds kind of like the Akai Timberwolf experience. And I'm really, really, really sorry for what I'm going to say now, but I think that's one of the worst synthesizers made of this era. Like, I'm really sorry for saying that. But this company that you're mentioning right now, I'm definitely going to check it out. Thank you for that tip, though,
Yeah.
because it is extremely cool, all the things that you can actually do. And I'm checking the website right now. I'm going to actually share the screen, so I'm not like being selfish, doing that myself here. So this is, and then there we go, like unique tools, effects, and yeah, you do have a lot here.
Yeah, they have like a crazy. And now their UIs are sort of notorious. I like them, but it can take a little while to get used to them. They do some really interesting A/B kind of things where you can like set it to a certain state and then switch it to another state and like do A/B testing, which is really useful. But it can be a little intimidating at first. But the UI is actually pretty cool and well thought out. But you just kind of have to experiment with it. But the thing is, you get all of these in M Synth Factory, so you can use all of these within the synth that you're building. Right? So you can just leverage like all their cool filter stuff, all their cool EQ stuff. I mean, everything in there. Like they have like all these cool.
And they have a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you're like halfway down the page. Like they have and they also have like a free bundle too of like cool oscilloscopes and stuff. Yeah, they're like oscilloscope and their oscillator stuff's all free.
Oh my god, thank you so much.
It's so cool.
Need one of these like for my computer, like check like mostly when it comes to, I mean, I do have an oscilloscope, but when it comes to like making music, I would like to be able to actually see the wave when I'm playing, and I think that's actually visually is very fun. So
and it has great tracking. So what it'll do is it can find like the single cycle in there. Like it does that automatically. You don't have to like set that to the same frequency of the note that you're playing. Like it tracks it and figures out the single cycle. And then it will like, boost the waveform so it like fits the whole monitor automatically. Like it sets the amplification of it. It's great. I love it. Yeah, there's some bonkers stuff, stereo imaging stuff. It's totally underrated.
I'm not against VSTs, but I have to say that I haven't used them in a long time. And thank you for that, because you're gonna make me go back.
VST Live, hey, collecting plugins, baby. I will say, if you want to get to the extreme end of VST collecting, there is a Facebook group that I love. It's so nerdy. It is called Obsolete Music Software.
All right.
And it's great. It's like these people doing like archaeology, digging up all this really old like plugins and all these like old, because just like there's like old school analog synthesizer nerds, there's like old school VST nerds too, and they're their own breed of like amazing like collectors, and they have these huge zip files of like all these VSTs from like the early 2000s, and that I like that stuff because in a funny way those were my first synths, because I just had a crappy like Dell laptop and like a basement apartment and like pure will to make music.
We all started with VSTs and digital synthesizers. I mean, I do think that they're very needed and very important for everyone for times. And I actually got into this through my computer and like getting VSTs and trying to learn not everything that I learned about synthesis, but mostly all the stuff that I learned from the beginning, it was on a VST. It was on like synthesizers, and if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have get like hooked into like, maybe I should now get a hardware. Like I should maybe get the thing and learning a bit more, and because that was how I started.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Wait. Let me hear. What was your first VST synth?
it was massive actually.
Oh, I see. Nice.
It was
You're starting with
massive.
some pedigree, man.
I,
That's a no joke starter synth, yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something that I'm not ashamed of saying. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea about native instruments. I had no idea about massive. I just remember that I was studying music production, and I come from like metal and new metal and progressive rock background, like
Uh huh.
getting really into electronic music. And then I got there, I just asked, oh, like what should I get into this? Like, would you recommend me? And my teacher,
Uh huh.
you should just get the massive, like just don't buy a synthesizer yet. Just get into that. I was like, all right. And when I see the huge, they was like, what the hell is this?
What's funny about Massive is like in many ways it has some cool features, like the fact that like when you modulate stuff it shows like the range on the dial. Like
Yes.
that's so cool. That's so important. But like, and that was like probably super innovative at the time, but
Yeah.
it doesn't do a good job explaining that, like what that is. Like I have a student who I'm teaching some Ableton stuff who we're in that group chat with, and she's using like Massive in Machine, like as a plugin in Machine, and
Yeah.
like working with her and like looking at Massive and being like trying to explain to her how these patches are built and like trying to figure out how to just turn off the reverb on it. I'm like, the reverb's all the way off. Okay, I gotta figure out, like, trying to dig through and find like how the modulation is routed. Like, oh,
It is
yikes.
a tough, like that's the way I do it, but it is a tough way of actually getting into synthesis.
Yeah. So props on you for jumping in deep. I want to give a shout out. This is not a synth that gets like any love, but FabFilter Twin 2 is hands down the best learner synth in existence. It is so cool. And I don't use it anymore because it's sort of, it was built in a time, I think, when CPU optimization was really important.
Yeah.
So its sound is kind of dull because of that. Like if you just look at the raw waveforms on it, like they're just kind of rounded out because of, I don't know exactly what's causing it, but Twin 2 is so cool, and it's such a great synth to learn on because it's like laid out. Let me just show you really quick. Fab Filter Twin 2. Let me see if I can find it. Oops.
Okay, while you're doing your research in there, I'm just gonna say, if any of you guys want to ask any question, feel free to do it.
Yes, please.
After this this last VST experience that we're gonna show now,
Yeah.
I think we're just gonna cut it here. And
Okay.
there is actually one of the guys who I really love, is a friend. He was saying like he's looking forward to get his Liven from Kickstarter. So yeah, I'm very
Thank you for pledging. Like, thanks for diving in on that and taking like, anytime you do a Kickstarter project, you're doing that on good faith that the manufacturer will actually make it and they're not just BSing you. Like I've had Kickstarter projects like not work or deliver like way late. And, I appreciate you taking that leap of faith with us. And we're deep in development for the Live-In. We're, going a little bit slower because of all the COVID stuff. Just because stuff like FCC certification takes forever now. Processes that took a week take 3 weeks. So, we're really trying hard to get all the certs nailed down. We have FCC certification now, so now we just have to do the European one and polish off the firmware, and then we can start shipping it out to folks. So thank you so much for pledging. And if anybody wants to keep track of, we send like dev updates through the Kickstarter for the backers. But we also share a lot of stuff in the Facebook groups. So if you just search like, let me just grab that. If you just search Sonicware Liven, Liven, or Sonicware ELZ1.
Okay, should I screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let me screen share. Am I screen sharing now?
That is mine, actually. If you
we
can,
sound like boomers right now. We're like, am I screen sharing? Are you screen sharing? What's happening? Let me see. Okay, do you see my screen share? I think you have to let it in to the call.
Yes, and in the meantime, I'm gonna also add there is another question here for you that is saying, what is your favorite waveform?
Oh, my favorite waveform. Oh man.
So, I'm going to share this. That is a lot of sharing. Send me the link on the private chat, and I'll add it later. And
okay, yeah, sure. Favorite waveform. I really like. I like synthesizers that can do like different waveforms, but still have pulse width modulation. So like pulse width modulation is like traditionally like with a square wave, but like when you make like the up part of the square wave really short and the like down part really long, or you like modulate that so it's not just like equal amounts of like up down on your square wave. These are technical terms. I'm sure Flavia is like cringing right now. The up downing of the square wave can be modulated, but it's really cool because there's some oscillators and like synthesizers that like allow you to do that kind of like pulse width modulation, but like with sine waves or with triangle waves or whatever. That's I really love like synthesizers that let you do that. So it's a long answer, but I love oscillators.
Could you name one synthesizer that you like, for example?
Oh, M Sound Factory does that. What are some other synths that do that? Yuhi Zebra does that.
Okay.
I think maybe Diva does that too. By the way, shout outs to Yuhi. That stuff is gold standard, man.
They're really
so
really
good. So good. And Diva is one of the other synths that can do that per voice modulation stuff I was talking about. It's a little more limited than M Sound Factory in terms of what you can modulate on that, but they can do per voice stuff. So legit on Yuhi for that. They're beasts. Anyway, so I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but I was screen sharing the Twin 2 by FabFilter.
I'm gonna add it. The guy just said like, so you are a big Nick Bat fan.
So I will look them up. I don't actually know that artist. Okay, here, I'm showing it now. See, we're like juggling. So this is
the link because I need to add it. So if you send me the link, then I can actually add it to the.
Yeah, let me just do that. I'll put it in the private chat. Yep. Here you go.
Otherwise, it's gonna be like a massive loop of screen sharing. There we go.
Yeah. So that thing.
I think you're a disciple of Nick Bat.
Yes. Drive people up the wall. But yeah, Twin 2 is such a cool synth. FabFilter, please make Twin 3. Like, call it triplet. Like, do whatever you gotta do. Like, please. Like, you make such cool plugins. You make the best EQ. You make the best like compressors, the best reverbs. Like, yo, give this synth some love. Like. And you can see, like, just looking at it, you can see what the architecture is. Wow, what a concept. You know, like it's not a wall of knobs. Like, okay, you got your oscillators on the left. You can change some parameters about the oscillators. Cool. You change the volume of them. Okay. Goes into 2 filters. Okay. You got your effect thing on the bottom, and you got your dry signal on the top. This synth is like, I watched this and those like old Friedman, New York School of Synthesis videos. Do you know the ones with the super nerdy guy? And he's like, talking about synthesizers. Anyway, there's this YouTube video that's got like a bajillion views that it was like that video and this synth got me through like learning synthesis. Like this is such a great synth. And also like the modulation options are really cool because it's like, it was one of the first synths that had like really easy drag and drop type stuff where it'd be like, oh, I want to do a modulation to a particular source. Okay, you just grab the crosshairs, you drag it over to like what you want to modulate. You know, it's almost like a modular type experience versus like, oh, I got to go in some matrix and then I got to like go the x-axis and the y. Okay, those two go together. Okay, you know, this was like really, I think, sort of innovative for the time. A modern alternative to this that I think has, you know, a more modern like oscillators and just is higher fidelity is called Circle 2. It's by Audio Workshop. Here, I'll send you a link.
Okay.
Man, I can talk. Okay, after this, I'll stop. I can talk about VSTs forever. I know you're like, I'm into hardware, okay?
As I said, I have nothing against plugins for VST. And I think it's very useful, and I think they are. I mean, I have a lot of respect for people who actually does and is able to program all of this. So, which I'm not, and I'm trying to right now. So, yeah, massive respect for developers who can do this.
Yeah, definitely. Like this one, I just sent you the private link to it. It's by Future Audio Workshop. I think they're. Yeah, I don't want to say where they're from because I'm not sure totally, but they're like a European company. This synth is really cool, and it has a lot of this UI stuff that I liked about Twin 2. In that, like, it's really easy to make the modulations, and the modulations are like color coded, so you can see like similar to Massive, like what's being modulated by what.
Like,
and it's like it's drag and drop, so you can like drag like, oh, I want this, you know, and it's got like 5 up to 5 oscillators. It's got wavetable stuff. It's great. I've been like saving my money to buy this. It's not even really that expensive. It's not much more expensive. It's cheaper than Serum. Yeah, it's like 150 USD, I think. So it's cheaper than Serum. But anyway, that's the benchmark, right? Serum these days is the VST benchmark that everything else gets measured against. But anyway, yeah, it's cool to hear your early days of VST adventures.
Of course, I tell you, it's something that I always say. Like, if you really, really, really want to get into synthesizers and learning synthesis, just invest in plugins. Just spend your time in plugins, in learning, in, you know, mess around. And once you have that base of knowledge, then you can decide which synthesizer or hardware you want to get into. Because I do think that they both actually can work together, and you can make amazing music with both together. But at some point, anyone will have that, you know, thing of like, I want to get something that is hardware. So having knowledge is easier than just going on YouTube and check YouTuber opinions and review about the best synthesizer for beginners. Like, get into what you like, get into what you want, and the more knowledge you have, the more power. So I totally support, like, especially for beginners that don't know how to get into synthesis, which I had a school, and I always had the question, like, how can I get into synthesizers and synthesizers and which one is the one you recommend me. I can personally recommend you one, but you will have to find your one, your sound, what you like, what is,
Yep.
like what you get into. So
Yeah.
I went the other way with Massive. So
yeah, I think that can't be undersold. Like,
yeah,
these YouTube reviewers, everyone's chasing a sound, right?
Exactly.
Whether that's something they heard on some album when they were a kid that affected them, or whatever, right? Especially with synthesizers, like, I probably watched some kid's video that had some synthesizer background music in it, and it imprinted on me, and I've been chasing that sound ever since. Like, I really strongly believe that's a huge component in like what sound it is you're looking for. And so when you watch these reviews and these guys are talking about these synthesizers, it fulfills their need or not to chase whatever that particular sound is that they're looking for. Now, you can make some arguments that, the UI, it's good to know whether the UI is good or not, or, that kind of thing. But a lot of the reviews are, does it fulfill, whatever sound it is that they're chasing? And that's not a bad thing. Like, musical instruments are subjective. Like, what they make, it can sound good to one person and sound totally garbage to somebody else. Like, somebody else might, listen to the Casio stuff that I like, or the K4, and be like, ugh, holy crap. I like aliasing and dithering and all that crap, like low sample rate stuff. But other people are going to be like, that sounds like hot garbage. And that's cool. So like you were saying, explore with VSTs. Like, it's low investment. A lot of them have demos. A lot of them are free. Like, there's tons of cool free VSTs, and just experiment, see what you like. Like, see, there's a lot of producers who will share like what plugins they use. Like, this guy Sadowick Productions, he's on YouTube, and he's like great. Like, he shows tons of different plugins. There's one called Waxadisc Music. He does like VST roundups of like 64-bit plugins that are like amazing. So explore, like, see what VSTs you like. Before you jump into hardware.
Exactly.
But or we're hardware manufacturers, right? Or in the hardware industry. So like the foregone conclusion, right, is that you will buy a hardware synthesizer, right? Because that's what we like, and that's what gets us excited, and we've devoted our career into. You may stop at VSTs. You may find that VST that sings to you, and that's your instrument, and like, more power to you. Like, you don't have to buy hardware.
No, you don't have to.
Irresistible, but you don't have to. If there's producers who just use Serum, right? Every sound they make is Serum. Like, and there's literally nothing wrong with that.
I mean,
like,
I don't have, for example, like a friend, his artist name is Donna Haringway, and he does mixing and mastering, and he was my colleague at Coma Electronic, and we were working together doing hardware. But most of the stuff, he invests a lot of money in VST. And that's why he says to me also, like, I do have this project when it's like pure industrial music, and their songs, they're like, they have the structure. And when he goes to play live, and I've seen him playing live, is only the Octatrack and the computer. He is not bringing, like, it's totally different of what I do. Like, I bring the whole studio basically to it.
Because I need my storage unit.
Exactly. But he doesn't do that. And he sounds sick. It's just literally one of the best live performances I've seen in a long time. Like, every time I go see him playing, it's amazing. And he's playing his new album, and like their songs, and he's super sick. And I know the way he plays also with a bit of, at home he designs with modular and VSTs. But when it comes to even playing live, we always had this conversation when he sometimes gets criticized for like, oh, you're not playing live. I mean, you're talking about a person who is screaming literally on the mic, trying to get all the structure of the song on the octatrack, and at the same time having the computer. We only have one brain, two ears, and two hands.
Yeah.
What else do you want to do?
And I would argue that like there are things that VST synths can get more complicated than hardware can. Like
there are limits.
There are no limits in terms of like complexity. Like there are some I forget what it's called. But I found this synth one time that was like based on like a model of like planets orbiting in gravity, and it was like you made your sound by like creating a solar system, and it was like like there are some crazy VSTs out there, like cannot be undersold. So it's like whatever, it's like it's in a different box, like what's this brings up one of the questions you had, that page that you translated from Japanese, about was it like post synthesizer or something?
I heard post modular, but that was the first time I heard synthesizer. I was like, what is this?
Yeah. So what is you saying when he says post synthesizer? So it's interesting to look at Yu's background as a like synth designer. So he's been making synths, and various audio equipment for about 20 years.
All right.
So his company has I can't talk about the company he used to work for because of copyright stuff, but he worked for a major Japanese audio manufacturer, and doing projects for them and working on various products and stuff like that. And his really early stuff is actually using the MSX, was his first computer and platform. So that kind of gives you an idea of like his era. So this was, for those who don't know, the MSX was basically the home computer before the NES.
Yes.
And it was, it was actually based on Windows, I think. It was like a sort of sponsored by Microsoft and some Japanese electronics company. Anyway, it was basically the like similar to like the Atari or something like that, where it was like a computer and a game system. It was like kind of both. And so the MSX had a bunch of different versions that had different sound chips and stuff in them and different, clock speeds. But it was like a standard that like a bunch of different manufacturers could use. It's a very Microsoft thing, right? You release a standard in a platform and then you outsource all the hardware manufacturer to like whoever the hell wants to make it. So that was the MSX. And then the NES kind of ended up kind of leapfrogging it for some various technical reasons. Like it was like the new hot thing, and then the MSX kind of they kept making models for a while, and then it kind of faded. I will not say it is done, because there is an incredibly passionate demo scene for it that's really cool and still makes software for it, which is amazing. But Uendo was into the MSX. I think that was like his first computer, which informs his like love for digital synthesis and stuff, because those were all full digital synths and they had like various different chips in them and stuff. So what he means by post synthesizer is actually really specific to digital synthesizers, in the sense that he has the feeling that digital synthesis was kind of like this really cool new thing, and then it sort of hit this technology of like PCM samples, right? So it was like, oh, all of a sudden your digital synthesizer can play all these samples, and so you can make a synthesizer that like the Korg M1, right, is the classic Rompler keyboard, right? Sold out the door. Like people bought that thing like crazy because it was the first time you could buy a keyboard that actually sounded like a piano or actually sounded like a trumpet. Like I've heard that the M1 was like crazy popular with mariachi bands because the idea was that you could get an M1 and you could have, your keyboardist do all those trumpet lines.
Who still playing that thing live up to these days? Mike Banks from Underground Resistance.
Uh-huh.
I have seen him playing that synth, and he made amazing stuff. I was like, it was the only person and the first person actually that I saw still using that synthesizer and does not get rid of it. Like everywhere he goes playing live, he plays.
M1, baby. And that's the thing. The K4R, my first synth, is like the weird, awkward younger brother of the M1. Mm-hmm. Like it has very similar architecture, but different PCM samples in it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so my understanding of Yu's idea of post-synthesizer is this idea that digital synthesis sort of, especially like in hardware synthesizers, sort of like reached this point where it was like really new, really interesting, new innovations, new types of synthesis. And then it was like PCM. And then it was like, okay, from now on, digital synthesizers will either be romplers, right? Be like trying to be real instruments, or every digital synthesizer is trying to be an analog modeling.
Yeah. Okay, I get it.
So there was like the whole evolution of like, all those Yamaha synths that were supposed to be like analog. There were only two options. It was like three. There was like FM, analog modeling, or PCM. Now PCM doesn't really exist anymore because samplers work on computers. There's no reason to have a hardware sampler unless you have some feeling,
stuff,
So the PCM stuff doesn't super make sense, or it's just been rolled into an idea of, it's got a sample library built into it. The DX7 FM synth stuff still exists, but it's pretty much the same as it was on the DX7, just with maybe a better interface. There hasn't been a lot of innovation, at least in my opinion, in terms of FM stuff. And then, then you're left with,
just one talking about have you played the Digiton, for example? Because I agree with you. Like in terms of FM, that there was nothing innovative, like nothing made, and I thought it was actually a good thing that they tried to approach it and remake it. Just check it out because it's an amazing FM synthesizer. It's not as complex and complicated and like mentally
taxing.
Yeah, exactly, like the DX7, for example. So it is very, very inspiring, and I had to say, it's the only digital synthesizer I have in my setup.
Oh, sweet! Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. That's really cool. Thank you for that suggestion. Well, anyway, what I think Uendo is trying to say with this post synthesizer is that he wants to push what digital synthesizers can do, in the sense that they should be experimenting with new kinds of synthesis, and they should be experimenting with new kinds of interfaces and form factors and stuff like that. And so when he says post synthesizer, I think what he kind of means, at least my interpretation of what he means, is that he wants to push what digital synthesizers are and what kind of sounds they can make. And you can see that in the ELZ1, right? Like there's 9 synth engines in that thing, I think. Yeah, there's like a ton of different synth engines in there, like everything from, low bit stuff to like noise. There's like that sand flute one. There's like there's a super wide palette of sounds you can make with that. And that's kind of also the idea of the Liven, right? So like this one is the 8-bit warps, the model we're working on now. And it's like, so it's really focused on like 8-bit sounds, and we're kind of messing around with stuff like, chip tune stuff, like being able to like do like sweep and like interesting stuff with the waveforms and stuff. So it's kind of like, it's pushing that 8-bit field around. And what's interesting about the Liven and what makes it sound different is that the sample rate on the Liven is 48K. So it's 8-bit, but the sample rate's really high.
Yeah, it's still
which is the reason why it sounds so clean, even though it's 8-bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the reason why, like, he's trying to push digital synthesizers in a way that they haven't been pushed before. And so if this Liven is successful, and we would like to do more models of the Liven that are exploring different types of synthesis, like that are emphasized on different things. Same hardware, but different firmware and different, like potentially different like the knob layout is the same, but labeled different, like a different silk screen, a different color, like a different, pushing it in a new direction, and then use the same hardware but focus it on a different type of synthesis, and keep doing iterations of that, and we can do that efficiently by having the same hardware.
Yeah.
Right. So like if we were Korg and we were doing the Volca, every Volca has different hardware,
different firmware or synthesis or whatever.
And they're big and they have a ton of staff, so they can get the FCC certification every single time, and they can run through a new hardware model for each one because they have the resources to do that. But if our company had to develop hardware every single time we had to make a synthesizer, we would release something every 2 years, every 3 years, or it would just be so expensive. To develop that. So it's like, that's kind of the model behind what I would consider what his idea of like post synthesizer. He's trying to say let's push hardware digital synthesizers to a new place that they haven't been before.
But I mean, I how to say that? I think there needs to be a balance between having enough time, giving enough time to your developers to develop and come up with something that is super cool, which for that, I think you'll need at least 5 years. Let's say that's a good deadline.
Interesting.
But in the meantime, talking about hardware, in the meantime, such a small company, like for example, Sonicware or any other small company that is actually starting and it has a small team, has to survive somehow. And I do like when things are recycled in a good way. That is not like, oh, we need money, like cash flow very quickly, and we're just gonna, and sorry to say that, we're just gonna have this, and we're gonna add a keyboard. Imagine the Liven, and then somebody with not many ideas in his or her head comes out we should just let's just add a keyboard next to it, and let's make the most ugly ever because we just need cash. So
I think I know who you're riffing right now.
So that is a really bad way of releasing a product. So showing yourself to the world and recycling, because I do think that especially in the situation we are living right now, not talking about the COVID, but we're talking about the massive curve we are in the market, in the synth market, that there is so many synthesizers. We as users and manufacturers, we don't get to think very well about how much waste we are putting out there in terms of plastic, in terms of components, in terms of everything. I don't think we actually are very aware of how much stuff we're putting out there. There are companies that are putting machines out there every 6 months. It is important to have, when you have a design like the Liven, for example, and it's working, it's tiny, it's cute, you can recycle it and use the same hardware with different with a different inside, with different firmware, with a different circuit, with a different somebody said it there, with a drum machine, with just a different engine. That's the word I wanted to say.
Yeah.
So it is really important for a company that is actually has developed so much time and spent so much money in developing that piece of hardware, that box that actually costs time and money, and reusing that for something that it makes part of the same line, that they all talk to each other, and then it makes sense. So I think it is a good idea for you. I think I told you that before anyway. Like, it is a great idea. You guys do that. And in the meantime, you give enough space mentally and financially to develop something new, if you know, ever comes to that. But
Yeah. And it also provides like a platform for, like, you know, let's say we find some developer and they're coming up with some really interesting plugin that like uses some really cool version of, you know, digital synthesis that we haven't seen before. Like, you guys probably already know this, but there are people still developing modes of synthesis. Like,
Yes.
they're all freaking over the place. Like, there's all kinds of crazy math, like, that goes into like the DSP programming, and all these different interesting ways to generate waveforms, and like all these different ways. And every time you generate a waveform differently, like, it opens up all these different modulation options. And, you know, so if we have this platform, you know, we could even partner with somebody, you know, who comes up, you know, or we could, you know, license some tech from somebody and be like, hey, we really like this, you know, this mode of synthesis you have, you know. I mean, that's how the DX7 happened, right? Yamaha did not come up with FM synthesis in-house.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they paid a lot of money to license that, you know. But because, you know, they were open to new ideas, they leapfrogged the whole market. Like, the FM, like, DX7 is probably solely responsible for killing several companies.
I believe
like, it's just the case, you know? Like, there's a lot of synths that were really cool analog synths that were, like, really innovative, and, like,
they were not
the
DX7.
They were an incremental push on the technology that already existed. So when the DX7 showed up and took the frontier, took the market of people who were wanting to have the hot new thing and the cutting edge thing, a lot of those analog synths that were really cool and probably some of the better analog synths ever, those companies just couldn't
handle it.
Couldn't pull back the market on that. That's what's so interesting about it. It's like, these synthesizers don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in a certain market environment. They exist, you know, to meet different consumers' needs. You know, like you were saying, like, we have hit like so much saturation. Like, there's so much hardware. We live in like this golden, I mean, you know, they say the golden age of hardware was in the 70s or 80s or whatever year you were born, or whatever age you were, 13, whatever year that was.
89, so I was too late for that math.
Yeah, so we kind of missed that. We're like, you know, but you know, we live in the platinum age of synthesizers or whatever, where like there's so much freaking hardware out there, and the old stuff is still kind of around. It's still really expensive, but you can find, you know, less popular models and, you know, pick them up for kind of cheap.
I want to say something to that ugly thing. Digiton keyboard. I just want to say one thing, and I hope, and I really hope you guys understand what I'm going to say, especially you, but you work with a manufacturer too.
Yeah.
Sometimes manufacturer companies, they put out there really amazing synthesizers, but they look so unappealing that they are not as successful as they should.
Yep.
And that is one of these cases. I personally work doing the sound sound designing for and presets for Digiton keys. I spent a lot of hours burning my eyelashes coming from work of working 8 hours soldering and manufacturing synthesizers to come home and make sound presets for that machine, for that abominance, because it's ugly. It's really, really, really unappealing and bad and big. And it's everything that you do not want to have in your desk. But it is one of the most amazing sounds and synthesizers I ever had. And I have it. And I have it both. I have the digital the standalone, and then I have also the keyboard. But it is so unfair. And I was actually talking this to another friend. Like, it is so unfair. That's such an amazing synthesizer because it sounds great. Then you have the pulse wave modulation, you have the sequencer, and you have many other things that you do not have on the Digiton standalone. And then you have like oh my God, I forgot the word. I don't even, oh God. The key when you actually press it, and then you can
aftertouch,
and then you can control, like you can have any single effect or feature controlling with the aftertouch, and at the same time you're touching you're playing with the aftertouch, and you can actually add modulation and modulate everything with the wheel at the same time. It's like,
that's an aftertouch keyboard.
it is
That's wild.
Keyboard, and it sounds,
that's no joke. Those are expensive. Like those are not easy to manufacture.
No, it does sound. It is like the keyboards are really good quality. It's an aftertouch keyboard, and I spent so many hours doing the preset sounds for these aftertouch presets.
That takes time because you got to make a preset, and then you got to be like, what's the juiciest thing on here to like modulate? So that's no joke.
And there is no effects. None of the sounds I made, you could not add any effects. So just imagine that it's like raw FM synthesis.
That's so sick. That's so sick.
And you really have, like, I spent a lot of hours, like a lot of days. I was going to sleep at 4 a.m. and then waking up at 8.
This is the sound designer's plight, man.
Exactly. And this is part of that. But when I saw the theme, when I saw the design, I was like, you are killing this synthesizer. You guys are killing it. You're gonna kill it. And it's true. Like, it's really bad because actually I did play with it. And it's amazing to play. One of the things that I was playing in the first place with the Digiton, it was like, if this thing could have a keyboard, it would be so nice. If you add the arpeggiator and then you have the sequencer at the same time with all of these features that you already have. And the most important thing for me was the aftertouch. It was like, how can you mess up so big on the design, which is actually not even comfortable? I'm left-handed. How am I going to play this keyboard and at the same time control the sequencer and do many other things? It's like, it doesn't. So please take in consideration.
I see.
That the design, the interface, it is extremely important when you are designing or redesigning something. If it comes to the point that financially it's not worth to redesign it because you don't have enough time or money, just don't do it, please.
Yeah, just wait. Yeah, I was just Google searching it to refresh my memory. Yeah, shout outs to Trovarsi. Actually, the first time I saw that was at their synth. They had a synth meetup at NAMM this year. And there was an artist who had one of those, and there was definitely some riffing in the crowd on it for sure. I mean, they should have just made it a keytar, baby. Just go full keytar, like, whatever.
Good, and you can do so much good stuff on it. Like, it's amazing. And at the same time, you can literally, it's a workstation. It's a fully workstation because in any keyboard, you can actually trigger any other sound because it comes with a different sound packs that you have all different drum sounds and any other kind of sounds that you can actually just have 4 tracks, but you can have a full song. You can create it and you can make a full song with it. So
That's so cool.
so
Yeah.
wow.
Oh. Yeah. This is the
I wasn't there,
challenge.
but
Yeah.
such an amazing machine. How important it is to take in consideration the interface. It is so important that if
Yeah.
you are gonna recycle it, just do it properly
Yeah.
and appealing, because it's something that first, it's something that you're gonna have in your studio, you're gonna look at it. Second, something to consider also is that most of us live in very small apartments. You cannot have a thing like it's this big. And then, it needs to look good. Like, you're gonna go to the studio and feel creative with it. And it's a keyboard and you play keyboards, you need your 2 hands. You cannot have the 2 hands here and then go that other way, just
Mhm.
the settings, it needs to be in front of you. I mean, there's many other
Yeah.
but going back to the live and going back to the point
Yeah.
that we were
Well,
talking.
I actually want to talk about one of the things you mentioned there, just like about UI. I'm not sure if you caught B-Boy Tech Report did an interview with Roger Lin. It was like B-Boy Tech Report, Ken Flux, and some of the other people who do like his podcast. And they did a conversation with Roger Lin that was very, very cool and really up to date, because it was like earlier this month, I think. And him talking about when he was, I think he was talking about designing the original Lin drum. And he was talking about how he had come up with some different prototypes and he was kind of trying to figure out, what he wanted to do with it. And so he brought it in to actually work with Stevie Wonder. And he brought it in and he was trying to show Stevie Wonder how to use this thing. And basically Stevie Wonder couldn't use it because it was all these menus and, there were a lot of UI elements that he just couldn't use, right? Because they were displaying values that were important, whatever. And so that totally changed. He basically scrapped what he had at that point and rebuilt the Lin drum around the idea of, making this thing accessible for
an artist. Yep.
Yeah, and potentially for somebody who is blind, right? And this is, keep in mind, this is a guy who invented the MPC. Like, probably the most breakout user interface for music software ever.
Yeah.
Beyond maybe like the 808 or something. Like that. But nobody uses the 808 as a template for UI. Everybody uses the MPC. Like every drum thing you've ever seen has a 4x4 grid or something similar, or has something that looks like the Lin drum, So it's like that. I feel like that's a great lesson in UI is can a blind person use it?
Yes.
if true, then you have an UI that's probably pretty good. That's not to say that displays are bad. The ELZ1 doesn't exist without a display, right? Because things are nested in, the 4 categories, so that, it doesn't, we don't pass that test with the ELZ1. Is it really easy to program? Yes. Is it fun? Is it, I would argue it's a great UI, but one of the, it doesn't pass that particular test, but I feel like the Liven does. I haven't tried it blindfolded yet, but I really want to. And I've been waiting because we've been changing the location of various knobs and stuff. So I didn't want to try and learn it blind with a UI that was going to change because that was going to mess me up. But now that I have something that's closer to basically the knob layout is set. Some of the settings and various things will change slightly. But now that I have this version, I want to see if it's possible, because the Liven only has the the 16 segment display or whatever. It's only got like 4 characters. So there's not really anything super, besides changing some settings in how the looper and the sequencer works. You can do most of it just by feel. So I want to try it and see if it's possible to do it blind, and see if there's any tweaks that we could make, and see if it's possible to optimize it for that. But anyway, yeah. So I think that, talking about UI and talking about the live-in, like for me, that's been in the back of my head since I watched that interview. So also, Roger Lynn is still working on his new drum machine, and he flashed it during the interview. He showed it for like a half second, and like everyone in the call is like, "Holy shit! Like, you've been talking about working on that forever," and like it's really cool. It's going to be so cool. Like the UI, like he has this weird thing where you can like have one, like it's like a square, and like one finger is like selecting the sound or the timbre of the sound, and then another finger is like affecting like the rhythm or the like re-trigger of it. It's so cool. You should watch that interview if you can. It's on B-Boy Tech Report. It's so cool. And like the Linstrument, I want a Linstrument, but I ain't got the money for it. But when I do, when I get paid someday, I'll get an instrument. Man, those things are so cool. But anyway, don't get me talking about MIDI controllers. We'll be here for another 3 hours talking about MIDI controllers, man. That's
okay.
That's a passion right there.
The last 2 questions, and they're non-related at all with synthesizers or music.
Let's do it.
And then we're done, because this is officially the longest chat, which is yes! I'm not complaining, because it has been, personally, I hope for you guys it's also like interesting, but it's been really nice and very inspiring for me. So I do hope like you guys are feeling the same, because it's been really, really nice to nerd out about all this stuff. What is your favorite food?
My favorite food? Oh man. Oh, geez. I mean, I mentioned this before. I really like sweet potato fries. Like, they're so good. And they're not total trash for you. I mean, they are kind of junk food, but I love them. They're so good.
You're talking to a person who's addicted to any kind of potato, so.
Yeah, the potato lifestyle is for me. There's so many different foods. I really like vinegary stuff. Like really? I love like acidy kind of flavors. So like I love like Japanese pickled stuff. I love regular pickles. I can't buy pickles because I just buy them and then I eat them all in like 2 days, and it's like so bad for me. It's like, oh, I just ate a month's worth of salt. Like, okay. Like I can feel my veins tightening, it's just like, I can't be doing that. So I have to like, I don't know if this is a thing in Germany, but like in the US, certain restaurants have like unlimited pickles. Like it's just like a part of their thing. Like some burger places, a lot of like Jewish restaurants have unlimited pickles. It's so dangerous. Like it's so dangerous. But it's I love it.
There is a lot of people chatting here. I mean, actually, there's a lot. When you go to the supermarket, you can find anything made out of like pickles.
Cool.
But there's not a thing that you find. I mean, first of all, there is not many Jewish restaurants here. There is a lot of Turkish, and then you can find a lot of like when you put like in the durum and the kebab, you can actually like there's a lot of pickles in there, but it's not very common. Like it's not, I do like actually when I went to the US, I brought a lot of stuff. Yes. And then the second thing, so okay, potatoes and pickles. So next time we see each other, I know.
Oh man, yeah.
And your favorite
soup?
Sweet.
Oh, sweet. Oh man. Oh man, that's hard. I mean, I love ice cream. I mean, that's just the go-to. I mean, probably the best ice cream I've ever had was I had a ice cream that was, well, okay, so it depends, but I had an Earl Grey ice cream cone that had lemon curd on it one time, and that was just like so good. I also shout outs to my sister city. If you're ever in Japan and you want to have a really like calm experience and like take a break from like hectic Japan, there's a small town called Shimada. It's in the Shizuoka prefecture, and they have a green tea museum, and they have like the city Shimada and all the neighboring cities are all really famous for green tea. So you can go into like all these different green tea shops, and they all have like it's crazy. Like you can go into like this shop, and it's got like the only ice cream they have is like tea based ice cream, and like eight of them are green tea varieties, and like 2 of them are black tea varieties. That's the only ice cream they have. So you can get like a parfait that's like 3 different kinds of green tea ice cream, and then it's Japanese, so it's always got like all the little toppings. And if you follow me on Instagram at @ChipperSwitch, you can see one of them that I had on my last trip. So that stuff is so good. Like the green tea museum, and it's not even really that expensive. Like it's probably not any more expensive than getting like a generic lame parfait in Tokyo. Not to say that Tokyo is lame, but it's expensive. Yeah. And so go to Shimada and get a green tea ice cream. It's mind blowing. Anyway, end with plug. I have to plug my little tiny sister city. Like they're like the El Cerrito of Japan. They're like tiny. Nobody knows about them. And what's funny is Shimada is the name of a haircut. It's like a Japanese bridal haircut. It's like a really cool haircut, like, and very like formal. And so when you say Shimada, people think the haircut because that's where it's from. So you're saying, "Oh, I'm going to Shimada," and Japanese people like give you like a like, huh? They give you like a what? Where are you going? So yeah. Anyway, I have to shout out my little home away from home out there.
Okay, let's just share this one last non-related.
There we go. That's the Shimada haircut, man. Man. You see somebody like doing the traditional Japanese wedding, man, that's the cut you do. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. That's all. Man, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. I love nerding out about this stuff. And all you folks out there, I don't know about Flavia, but for me, if you want to nerd out about stuff like on IG or like on Facebook or whatever, like send me a message. I don't know what your policy is on that, Flavia, but like if you are just interested in it, like just send us send us a message. Like you have questions or you find cool gear, like we're always down to talk about it or learn more about it.
Have his Instagram. I'm actually gonna say something. I'm always on Instagram. I don't get any notification on Facebook. I'm really sorry, guys, if you have, any of you have ever sent me an invitation on Facebook. But feel free always, anytime, to send me a message on Instagram and ask me anything, any doubt you have. Like, I get questions like, oh, what soldering irons should I get? Or what kind of soldering wire should I get? Or like many other things. It doesn't matter. Even just like saying hi, just to, get in touch. I like that. I like to get in touch with people. That's why you and I even talk all the time.
Yeah.
I met some of my best friends and on Instagram. I met Trovarsi there on Instagram. And then that's how we build a community, and that's why we get to know each other. That's how we can grow and learn from each other and share all this information and, like food stuff and tea, which I love.
Yeah. And that's what I kind of like about like the IG community around synths and like synth user groups. It's like sometimes I kind of feel like when you have like there's kind of this relationship between like big YouTubers or like internet famous people and like the public, where like they're so big that they just get this like fire hose of like people trying to contact them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like they have to like set up walls basically to make sure that they don't get overwhelmed and to like, you know, build a healthy relationship between them and their audience. Like I totally understand why they do that.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's important. But it also creates this kind of like feeling of like inaccessibility, or this feeling of like, oh, to like contact them, I have to like get their attention somehow, which is like through doing some crazy like amazing music or doing something, winning some contest or something. And so it kind of creates this like kind of fame, kind of like has-beens, has-nots, you know, kind of relationship that I like don't feel super comfortable about. And like that's part of the reason why like I don't want to be like a super big synth YouTuber, is because I like being part of this community as a little bit just as a bystander, and like a little bit just as like, oh, I could just have a talk with somebody and like the comment feed isn't going a mile a minute. You know, I can just talk to somebody and we can get to everybody's comments, and it's like, I don't know, it feels more homey kind of and more accessible.
But let's make one thing clear here. That doesn't happen, like, for example, that doesn't happen with many of the YouTubers. But for example, Trovarsi, I know she's very accessible to anyone. Like, you can just go and ask her. And people, for example, like Heimbach, he has loads of followers and he gets loads of questions every day. And because he knows that, he every month at the end of the month, he actually has this type of chat where you directly can ask him anything you want. So you don't have to be like sending me like shitloads of messages and then he's not gonna, you know, like ignore them or anything like that. He actually, because of that, he knows, and he's a very humble person. I have to say, a very sweet, humble person. And that's why he does that. Like, he makes sure that he doesn't lose that humanity with his followers, you know, like he is also an artist.
That's really cool.
So he is the type of person that I admire personally and professionally, because one, he does know, I think is one of the most intelligent and full of knowledge men in this industry, that he does know a lot of stuff. And at the same time, he's very accessible. So he does that. You can actually just go there. I think actually, I don't know if he's still on live stream, but he was going on live stream like a few hours ago. And you can do the same thing that we're doing here and just ask him. Like, he has this
That's
like
cool
answer. So you can ask him and he answered from anything, like his, you know, best food to just something like super quirky and interesting and very deep into whatever you want to ask him. So I think it is important to, I think every YouTuber or every personality out there shows his character as he wants. So if you become a person who just want to be famous and known for, you know, my YouTube videos and my reviews, and I get this deal from the manufacturer, that's what he is gonna put out there, and that's the kind of image he's gonna get, like inaccessible. I think this is a very small community to become that type of person.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. It's
So-
like things get around quick. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you got that love from people that appreciate your talent, your music, your knowledge, whatever you are putting out there, just be able to give it back. You know, like as I always say, life is all about inputs and outputs. It's just like modular. So whatever you give, you receive, you gotta give it back. And that's the whole reason why I actually decided to do this. So, and I'm not a big YouTuber or anything like that. So I think it is really important that if you ever become something like that you don't lose your ground and make it. We are living in such a big internet times right now when you can be accessible to people. through
Yeah.
other platforms and other ways. So
Yeah.
I'm very opinionated about that.
No, I think that's cool, and I think it's cool to point out an example. It's really easy to criticize on the internet. Like, it's really easy to be like, oh, that sucks, or this trend sucks, or this person's reviews were bad, or whatever. But I think it's also like super important to point out like when people are doing things right.
Yep.
Especially companies. I feel like companies get stung a lot. Like, they, could put out 3 great products, 3 great iterations of the same thing, and then they put out something new and they, maybe they screw up, like, and then they get like totally stung, by it. So I think it kind of depends, like, I think it's good to be critical of a company when they do something that's like sort of a cash grab, or that's just like blatantly like, oh, how could this happen? Or they're doing something that feels like exploitative, where they're like coming out with a new model and like bottlenecking some feature, or like being like, it's the same hardware, but you just can't do X because we say so.
But I think that should be also the company's duty to be honest. Like, we cannot, forget, even if you're Korg, for example, and then you really, or Electribe, which is awful, like the new ones, for example, in my opinion. And people don't like it for whatever reason, and they criticize it like, oh, this sounds bad, or this looks bad, or whatever. At some point, I think whether you are a big company or a small company, you will have to come clear and be honest and say, we're not going to do this, or we can't do this. We have these limitations. And as users, we cannot forget that these are people behind these machines, they're humans making machines. So, there needs to be an understanding from both sides.
Yeah.
Well, that's life. That's how it works.
Yeah. Like, every piece of hardware was somebody's baby,
Yes.
It's like, it was somebody's, like you said, burnt eyelashes and, and deadlines and, like the SY35, like I criticized it earlier in this video, but like that synth was made on an incredibly tight time scale. It's great for what it is. It was really innovative at the time. Me complaining about its sysx implementation is like, that's like a fly on the windshield, like this did what it was supposed to do at the time. This was people's, there's 10,000 hours in this thing between the whole team, so.
But that's the thing, like every time, whether you like it or not, like I also feel like every time it is tough, but at some point we all have to grow as people, as personally inside. And once you put something out there, you gotta know that people might like it or people might not like it. So,
yeah. And you gotta be willing to learn from that. Yeah.
Thick skin, like I grew up.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And the thing is, I feel like even if you have a bad product, if you handle it well, it's not going to necessarily,
and it's a learning
damage your, I mean, I think it's also, it's intentionality too. It's like, did you make a bad product because you were trying to cash grab and you were trying to pick up on some trend and you're willing to burn some of your reputation to do that? Yeah. Or is it a bad product because it's weird? It's like, and people don't get it. Like, there's plenty of products that are weird and people don't get it, but are still cool. Those are the products that are cheap on Reverb that I love, right? That's, like this thing, but like Alesis iNeco, like this thing's weird. It's awesome, but like, I don't, maybe they may, they probably did all right on it. It's not like, people don't quote that as their like mind blowing. I like it, but there's plenty of weird stuff like that, that's like, somebody's, I mean, just go look at old NAMM press releases. Go look at the thousands of people who tried to make light up keyboards. It's like, some of those were awesome. Some of them weren't so awesome, but
Yeah.
you know, it is what it is. It's
Yeah.
at some point the rubber meets the road, you know, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it's awesome, and it just wasn't on the market at the right time, you know. It's yeah. You just have to try your best, you know, and try and build a network of people who are going to give you some perspective on it.
Yep.
I don't know.
Be honest about it.
But
Well,
anyway, we went from food and we got magneted back into the
yes,
synth industry. We got to be careful. But I know it's like, I can tell it's like, you know, it's like 1:30 here, but I'm sure it's like super late over there. So I'm going to let you go. I'm sure you're like low on blood sugar and calories and just like eating.
in like an hour and a half, there is a live stream when I'm playing. So it's a long day. So
Yeah,
much.
I'll let you go.
And thank you so much for this chat. It was really fun, really interesting.
Thank you.
Also nice to get to know you a bit better. And guys, to you and Endo, I wish you all the best and success.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
There is a lot of passion behind these products, these instruments, and you guys deserve all of the best, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah.
And yeah, admire you and Endo a lot. So yeah, all the best, and I hope like in like 10 years we can go back and look and see this conversation and see where we are and laugh about it.
Yeah. NAMM 2030. We're just like, all of our predictions were completely wrong. It turns out that pedal organs, that was the hot thing, and we just freaking missed that boat. Yikes. Yamaha was right.
Yes, that's
Darn
very
it.
synth.
Yeah. Yeah. Human powered. That was the innovation we needed. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so
Thank you. Thank you.
And you guys, thank you very much also for joining and
yeah.
And this will be uploaded later on. I'm gonna take a break of 1 or 2 weeks and then get ready for the next season of Let's Talk Nerd. Next one is going to be about modular, and I do have very nice and interesting guests also that I'm preparing.
So mysterious.
So yeah, I hope you guys have fun, enjoy this. And yeah, I hope to see you all very soon. Please take care, stay safe. That's the most important thing. And yeah, that's it. As always, may the force be with you, and thank you very much. Bye.
Good night.